if everyone can just put their cameras on, we can see who's in attendance. I know Councillor Whitmarsh is unable to attend today, just for his information. So Councillor Ferguson said he's here. I don't see him. So what I'm going to do now is bring the special meeting to order. And I just want to acknowledge that we're
somebody's phone is on.
Traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and especially acknowledge the special relationship that we have with the Kwantlen, Katzie, Semiahmoo, and Musqueam First Nations. So the first thing is to adopt and receive the agenda items. Could I have a motion on that, please? Councillor
Ferguson
moves, and Councillor Arneson seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Carries. Thank you very much. So here we are at Council Parties and Budget Process workshop. I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Gordon McIntosh, who will lead the informal council discussion on council strategic priorities and 22 budget guidance. And I know some information was sent out. We've had a chance to review, and really this is here for Dr. McIntosh to lead, and I will step back and allow him to proceed. I do see there's a question from Councillor Richter. Councillor Richter, if you want to go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make sure that the 19 notices of motion that I had brought forward to the last workshop that we had like this on April 19th were in fact going to be addressed today. I believe that at least I recall my understanding of the meeting was that we would refer that list of 19 to Dr. McIntosh to work with the staff when he was going through his work with the management staff, but that the list of 19 would be discussed with them, and we would be getting some sort of a report back on that. And I have to admit that I'm not clear that we did get a report back in the materials that were sent to us. Some of the items were touched on, but the whole list was not. Yeah. So I want to make sure, because my understanding for today's session is that it was to focus on the budget process going forward. And this whole day was to be spent on budget process, that we will be, in fact, touching on those 19 items, which I believe encapsulate all the concerns I have around the existing budget process.
Yeah, thank you. And I had that discussion with Dr. McIntosh this morning, and we discussed those. And one thing, I mean, it's totally up to council and how they wish to proceed. One thing we discussed is that the motions that you presented would certainly form a basis for discussion as we move through the day. And then, you know, we're in early days for a 2022 budget, and certainly want to set some direction, set some guidance, and really delve down onto it. So I'm going to let Dr. McIntosh describe.
I have my hand up to you, Worship.
Yeah,
just
yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
We turn it over, Mr. Mayor. Again, just a point of clarification.
Yeah.
I don't want to spend half of this meeting talking about our priorities when the budget process was the number 2 priority on our list. This entire meeting, from my perspective, should be focused on the budget process and nothing else. Because if we deviate off into reviewing our strategic priorities, et cetera, well, we've got a bunch more that have just been thrown at us, like the RCMP contract settlements that could increase the costs of a constable by $20,000 a year, not to mention the retroactive. So, I mean, we're going to have to deal with that. It's clear we have a new bargaining unit that we're going to have to deal with. But I don't think today is the day to be talking about our priorities going forward. I think today is the day to be talking about the budget process. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thanks. Councillor Long? And
yeah,
then I'll turn it over to Dr. McIntosh.
Yeah, well, first of all, we just passed an agenda, so we're going to do, I hope, the agenda that we just passed. As far as Councillor Richter's discussion, as far as Councillor Richter's mention of these 19 items, the minutes clearly show from that meeting that they were referred to staff for information, and that means that those 19 notices of motion have been disposed of. So no, I don't think that this council is going to start discussing them at today's meeting, especially since we've just passed an agenda. And those items have been referred to staff for information, and staff has received them. There was no mention anywhere of a report or any further discussion. That was the motion that was passed pretty clearly, in fact, almost unanimously at the last meeting. So perhaps we can have clarification on that, Your Worship, because I don't know if we want to go down any rabbit holes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Richter, just I'd like to turn it over to Dr. McIntosh because he's going to lay out, and like I say, this was discussed, he's going to lay out the program for today. It's really his show, and I want him to do it. But Councillor Richter, if you have one more thing to add, then we'll
I just want to add that as usual, Councillor Long is misinterpreting what happened in that meeting, and he's
Point of order. It's not
reading,
as
reading
so
the
misinterpreting.
motions.
Come on.
Oh,
So
come on,
let's
Councillor
just
Long.
let Dr.
Why
McIntosh.
Can you
would
not
I
read?
go through this?
Councillor Long?
I kept
You
my
read the
mouth
minutes.
shut while you were talking. Now you keep
Councillor
your
Long.
mouth shut while
Well,
I'm talking.
You know what? You've said something that's offending, so you can take that back.
Okay,
I didn't even
let's get back on
interpret
track.
anything. Thank you.
Okay, what
thanks.
I wanted to say was that I put the motion forward to refer it to staff for review based on the
No.
understanding,
Okay, Councillor Long, please.
based on the understanding that it would be coming back to this meeting, because I had wanted to deal with every one of those 19 notices of motion at that meeting. And the mayor had suggested that what we do is refer them to staff or to Dr. McIntosh to work through with staff. I felt that was an acceptable solution because I was always under the belief that it would be coming back. So for Councillor Long to sit there and say that in his opinion, these 19 notices of motion has been disposed with, I think he's wrong.
Okay,
He's
that's fine.
misinterpreting because he doesn't
Well,
want to spend time
Yeah,
going
Councillor
through.
Long, they
Just
haven't
before
referred.
just before
they
you
haven't
be quiet,
referred, Councillor Long. So we're
before
going
you
to
tell me to be quiet
McIntosh.
again, Your Worship.
Okay.
Did Councillor Richter read the minutes? Because that's exactly what the minutes said is what I said. So there's no misinterpretation on my part. But if Councillor Richter hasn't even read that, maybe she needs to have a look at that.
Let's turn it over to Dr. McIntosh. He should jump in at this point, and then we'll guide our way through, and we're not going to ignore any input, no matter what form it is, from any member of council, and we'll work our way through. Dr. McIntosh, I'd like to turn it over to you. You're on mute.
So great to see everybody. Happy whatever day it is, July 5th. I think the direction that we got from previous meetings were three things. One was service areas of interest, which actually came February and April. And those are budget related, right? Notice it says areas of interest. So are there areas that you want staff, we don't have to solve them today, that you think, hey, it'd be worth looking at as the budget's prepared? And of course, there are and I'm just going to go first names if that's okay, Jack. Is that okay?
Oh, it's fine. Like I said, it's informal. Now that's yours, and
great.
we want to keep it informal. And as far as the speaking list, did you want me to help you manage that?
That'd be awesome. That'd be awesome because I can't see everybody.
Okay.
And so, so there are ideas in those 19 items. Great ideas, great list, by the way, very relevant to the budget. So some of them have not been touched. Those can come up on service areas of interest, for example, vehicles, climate action, etc. The intent in talking to staff is the strategic priorities would be a quick check-in. Why those two items are first is because the service areas of interest and our priorities, they've changed it all, are important as we head to the budget. So the intent is, I'm just guessing, kind of 70% or more of our day would be related to budget and service areas. So that's kind of what I thought we might be doing today. And with that, we always, it's a workshop. The other thing I think is it is a workshop, but let's, if it's okay, Jack, we declare that at the end, if there are any emerging notices of motion that require you would take over, for voting. So I'm pretty comfortable that we're going to handle all these items today. As well, of course, everybody else has items that they didn't necessarily submit in the previous meeting. So I think I'm very comfortable that many of these will be able to discuss, and the new ones will be able to unpack. So with that, can I go? I'm just going to do a quick round table, but I do see Councillor Kim has her hand up.
Yes, thank you very much. So I just want to reconfirm that the 19 notices of motion that I put in, any that have not been dealt with, I can bring up and re-add as service areas of interest.
Absolutely.
Okay, so basically all of them that weren't included, I will be putting back on the list then.
Absolutely. And
okay.
maybe additional ones. And I got this last night, so I kind of starred some of them, and between the two of us, everybody will make sure. I'm pretty confident we'll make sure they're all covered by the end of the day. How's that?
Okay, thank you.
You're okay with the agenda?
Me?
Yeah.
I don't think the strategic priorities are necessary. I think that's just going to be a time drain. I think the issue today is budget, but.
Okay. Well, let's see how we do. And with that, Patrina, how are you feeling? Are you on mute?
There, sorry.
There you go. There you go.
It's early Monday morning, relatively speaking.
I know.
Yes, I'm feeling very good. I'm looking forward to today. I think it'll be an interesting discussion. Hopefully we can make some progress in some of these substantive areas. So appreciate you being here and look forward to the rest of the day. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Patrina. How about you, Margaret? How are you feeling about the three focus areas for today?
Yeah, no, it looks good. Yeah, thanks for coming. We'll hopefully have a good day today.
Well, just a reminder, because I know it's been brought up before, this is very tactical. It's not big picture thinking. It's not vision, goal setting or anything. It's very specific, so very tactical. Steve, you look like you're technologically sound now. How are you feeling about the agenda? Three parts for today.
Oh, I don't think there was any technological problem. Actually, my technological problem worked well. I have my headphones on, and I had to go to the washroom quickly. That's all. That's all.
Wow.
So I'm not that. The whole public will be hearing that, but that's part. I'm a human being. Okay. So yeah, technology. I actually think it's good. The three areas. I still all the time I've been involved with this type of thing. I'm still a big believer of review and updates, especially look at COVID as an example. So updates. I have no problem with that. In fact, I even asked a lot of questions off council to staff on updates. So I'm happy with the way things are set up. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And how is Bob? Bob?
Oh yeah, well you've already heard my concerns a little bit. I hope that we can, all of council have an opportunity to participate in a very positive way. We've approved your agenda. I like it. Personally, I've never had an issue, specific issues with the budget, because it's just something that we have to deal with, and it seems that it can be challenging to many. So perhaps this will provide some tools for each councillor so that they can move forward in a positive way, and we can all share in the duty of having to put this budget together, which is it's tough, it's challenging, but anyway, I'm hopeful, and I will do my very best to try and get the most positive we can from today's workshop, and I'm quite happy with the agenda that you've set forward. Thank you.
Thanks. Eric?
Yeah, no, I'm fine. Thanks.
Thank you. And is David with us?
No, Councillor Davis is not logged in yet.
Okay, and I know Blair's not with us. It sounds so. And Jack, I think, how do you feel? Just make sure we cover everybody off on council.
No, I think I've made my comments. Thank you. I look forward to a great day. Thanks.
Thanks, Jack. And how are? Let's do a quick check with Mark on behalf of staff. How are you feeling about the agenda?
Thank you. Very good. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Great. Okay. So with
Kim has a hand up.
oh yeah, thank you, Kim.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that we're not actually putting a budget together today, as suggested by
Okay.
Councillor Long, that we're putting a framework for putting a budget together.
Good clarity? Okay.
Yeah, okay, because I did read the material that was submitted. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think when we get there, we'll speak to the not that the budget is problematic. It's generally across the country. It's a preamble. Anyway, let me open that discussion when we get there. Okay, so that I don't do a squirrel thing, right? So we're going to start with services, areas of interest, knowing the vessel is pretty full. And let me just put a little bit of context before we dive. Some years ago, I'm thinking about 3 years ago, we looked at capacity. Did our capacity match our expectations? And when we did that, it was primarily related to, was our staffing capacity keeping up with expectations? That is not what we're doing today. But we did some good work there, and so that inventory was available to everybody to take a look. So today, what are we seeing? We're seeing a lot of pressures. I thought I'd just highlight why it's important what you're doing, because what we're seeing across the country with on average now 50 to 60% turnover. New Brunswick just had elections, Nova Scotia, Saskatchewan, and we're seeing a huge turnover on councils. And so what does that bring? Well, it brings an interpretation of public needs. For example, in certain areas where we're seeing the need for housing, affordable housing, attainable housing, in other communities, community safety. So there are community needs, imperatives that perhaps we need to consider. There's also resident desires, sort of things that they would like. And maybe not so much for Langley, but maybe. But what I'm seeing in a lot of small communities, I was working with Digby, St. Andrews, St. Stephen's, Haines Junction. A lot of urbanites are moving to smaller communities, and now they bring with their desires, the services that they've had. We also have, as we've chatted before, we're seeing downloading requirements to, whether it's WorkSafe BC or environmental regulations. And we're also seeing offloading, just senior levels of government not providing services. Again, I think the most profound one that wouldn't be totally connected to Langley is medical services. We've got small communities all across this country now. My last count, about 60 of them now running medical clinics. And you say, well, what's that got to do with anything? Well, you start taking on services, and this has been brought up before, what's within our mandate. And you could say, well, medical services are not within our mandate. Oh, okay, that's very true unless you're in Ontario. But hey, if you don't have a medical clinic, medical services, you don't keep people. People leave. You don't keep seniors. You don't attract people. You don't keep people. You don't have a market. You lose retail, and you don't get employers. And so this is a real struggle for local governments that mandate box is changing with changing demands. So these things are coming down, but meanwhile, upward pressure is our infrastructure, our assets system, our replacement. In many communities, and I think Langley's like this, it's not only the replacement, but it's the investment in new infrastructure required for growth. So what's this causing? What's happening inside the organization? Well, we have limited resources, of course, so people are looking for new sources of revenue. Everybody's chasing rainbows for grants, looking at changing user fees. We have, in fact, a lot of local governments across the country setting up municipal corporations. They're separating some services to run like a business and relative to the private sector. I already mentioned changing faces. We have changing dynamics, changing demographics, changing age, and again, bringing new features. And what I see then is kind of a regime or shift. Some people coming in saying we got to run local government more like a business. I think business like is more appropriate, but nevertheless, where others are saying we need to be more democratic. We need to be outreach. We need to consult with people. So these put a lot of stress, not only on council, because, hey, most people don't know what you do, so they approach you with service demands, service complaints, and we know that. And also it puts stress, of course, on staff. So what's happening relative to that? Well, one, cost cutting, cutting costs. Certainly in Northern Alberta, the oil patch, major initiatives to actually cut costs, prune, if you will. Got to work with the pitcher. For others, it's how can we shift services, change them so we can make room for new services or new priorities. For others, it's especially post-election. I'm seeing it's what I call the forensic audit. We got to get in there and see what's wrong. And of course, there's always the idea of our job is to provide excellent service, customer service, right? So how do we continually try and make sure that we show value for money, etc. So, little preamble just to put it in context that what we're talking about is normal all across this country right now. So, what would an area of interest be? Now, I know a lot of you are not, hopefully, in the kitchen roaming around looking at detailed services. We know that. But you have eyes, you hear things. And so today, we don't need to get defensive. We just need to bring up areas of interest, things that we've heard things about, things that we inquire about, things that we have ideas about to save costs. Hey, if we did this, maybe we could save costs. It might be worth exploring. Maybe it won't save costs today, but if we invest today, next year, it will save future costs, i.e. technology is a good example. May not save today, but in the future it would. We need to perhaps look at increasing revenue in certain areas. They have some revenue opportunities, cost sharing, user fees, etc. Have we ever thought maybe of providing that services differently? And whether that is contracting in, i.e. Contracting in means we actually provide it to somebody else to make money. Contracting out, or enabling others to provide that service, i.e. often grants and aid, working with nonprofit organizations. Is there areas where we've been hearing things around customer service, the frequency of a service, the response time, etc.? A big one that I don't expect necessarily council might see, but there might be areas where, wow, if we did this differently, we could save huge amounts of time. A good example that you did go through was, for example, the development management process, right? Can we look at preserving the integrity of our bylaws, etc., but meanwhile, perhaps save staff time. Perhaps there are areas we could share resources. Maybe we need to work with other municipalities or indigenous communities or the private sector. There could be areas that we're not sure if we're compliant with legislation. There might be areas where we need to outreach to people more, to be more transparent, to engage people, to get input, to get ideas, and overall create. So I just put a hit list together of things that perhaps if you had time before today, or even today, that we might think about. Again, reminder, areas of interest. We do not have to solve these today. This is, as Kim indicated, these are things that as the budget is being prepared in July, August, September, October, we want staff to unpack. Initially, they'll just be ideas, and then I'll look to try and get some concurrence depending on the list. So there's no magic to what we're doing today. There's nothing individually that will be magical that adjusts everything. So with that in mind, a reminder, there might be alternate revenue sources. So there might be areas, but what could we do? Well, we could be contracting in to make money. We could be looking for grant sources, user fees, cost sharing. We could adjust the service level. You know, sometimes when we do this, it's actually to increase it. But it might be, you know, maybe given COVID, I think a lot of people are realizing, gee, we didn't get a lot of complaints about changing the frequency of a service or the level of a service. Are there areas, and we've talked about this before, that we can enable others to take care of themselves so that we don't have to provide that service? And in particular in COVID experience is how do we make sure nonprofit organizations can survive to continue that service so they don't kind of put it back on us? Are there alternate providers? We don't have to provide everything, and perhaps we can work with others. Use of technology in our systems, in our operations. So with that in mind, I'll just kind of go round table. Now for this, if it's okay, I'm going to include staff just to put everybody on a radar. Let's get all the ideas out. There was a hit list call. So I'll just go in the categories, and then if there's nothing, there's nothing, and then we'll just kind of work through. Now I'm going to change my screen here, enlarge it a bit. I'm a little, you know, as in the past, I'm a little bit kind of, there we go. Just so we can see, it's like a flip chart, right? See what everybody's got. So let's, now, I think we're not shy. So I could go round table for every single one of these, but I think I'll just open it up and say, okay, on RCMP support, are there any areas of interest that we ought to look at as we head to budget? But you know, it's not just budget related. Like they could be done much sooner than budget as well. Okay, open it up. And Jack, if you give me a hand. Now I see Kim's hand is up. I'm not sure if it was up from the previous.
No, my hand is up because I had a question on the speech you just gave with regards to separating some services to run like a business.
Yeah.
Can you give us examples of that?
Yeah. So three different scenarios. One would be a utilities, and so Grand Prairie and Region, for example, set up a municipal corporation where the municipalities combined and now run the utility, for capital, et cetera. And the notion is to try and separate that service delivery, which is a private good, water consumption. And so it attempts to run like a business, and it produces revenues that go into capital replacement, but also creates a dividend that goes back to shareholders. That's one example. In Calgary and Surrey, what they've done is initially they set up a development corporation and they provided it land that then the corporation then sold, developed, in some cases partnered with businesses, and then repaid the money back to the city. And so they run like a business. In different areas, it depends on the sentiment, because water is a utility, it's monolithic, there probably is nobody else. But when you start competing with land development, obviously you have to be sensitive to the private sector. In another example, very different, for example, in Halifax, they have a municipal corporation to run essentially the marina, right? And so again, the intent is to run and act like a business and make profits, but the profits are back to come. Another good example, Kim, actually is very unique, but Medicine Hat sits on oil and gas. It has for 100 years. And so they separated that operation as a business and a corporation. The caution always on these municipal corporations is if it flies like a duck, talks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's good odds it's still a duck. What do I mean by that? Well, the example that I gave you for Grand Prairie, which is called EBCOR, initially it was all of council that were the board of directors. And so it got a little convoluted. And so they have now divested into retaining people as board of directors and not councillors. So there's little bumps and grinds, but just generally, interestingly, if this is hopefully I'm still on the radar here, others have created foundations. So on the flip side, some municipalities have actually created foundations that can give tax receipts. So the Calgary Parks Foundation, the Maple Ridge Community Foundation, the Vancouver Community Foundation, where the municipality actually created it and have a board of governors, etc. So you've got, on one hand, trying to mimic the nonprofit sector. Again, it's got issues. Are you competing with the nonprofit sector for sponsorships, etc.? And on the other hand, trying to run like the private sector. So, two examples.
Is there any reason why any of these areas of interest that you've got listed up here couldn't all be identified as being a separated service to run like a business?
Yeah, there's probably quite a few in the sense of they're not necessarily, just generally, not necessarily a private good, and therefore with a profit element to it, right? So, for example, protective fire be probably pretty tough to run like a municipal corporation.
Okay, but if you had an objective of break even instead of profit.
Yeah, but you wouldn't necessarily need to run it like a municipal corporation to do that. That would be a review of your user fee philosophy, where you would look at, is this a public good? Like, but even that, you look at a public good, a park. More and more people are now charging for the parking, right? Which is a way to get money, to a private good. So regardless of the service, it's a question of where you would put it on the continuum. Is it a pure public good, or is it a pure private good? And then there's, of course, a mix in between. So generally, the municipal corporation works well for what's called a private good, where there are very specific people who benefit from that service.
Okay, thank you.
So
I think Steve.
Yeah, you've got Steve here. This, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was thinking about these very things, Dr. McIntosh. I forgot your first name because everybody's calling you Gord.
That's Gord, because I'm not calling you Councillor Ferguson, so it's Gord.
Yeah, you should. Oh, by the way, in less than a minute, what is your PhD in?
Public administration, specifically local government.
What does CLGM stand for?
It means I'm certifiable.
And it's certifiable LGM means I'm dying at this stuff. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Certified local government manager.
The reason why I'm saying this, and I've just about got 10 seconds, is that my daughter got official PhD candidacy. And I said, I thought you're already in the program, honey. She said, no, I'm official now. Okay, whatever that means. And she's doing it in business, I think. She's at the BD School of Business at SFU. Okay, so she's a candidate, whatever that means. Okay, so I wanted to say that all those things you suggested, uploading, downloading, in and out, I think those are phenomenal. And I think that in the past, what we did is we had a long-term financial plan, and we came up with a lot of ideas on how to do things differently, not better, not worse, but differently. And that came to have an efficiency in building like the one we're in right now, and how we manage our fleets as automotive and diesel fleets.
water. And I want to say that we actually had a Langley. It's over 100 years old, I guess. And basically, we had a municipal sewage system, which we flipped that over to the Metro Vancouver, and we saved a lot of money that way. So we did a lot of things differently. And I think it almost involves like I won't call it a task force, but a team of, think tank people that we would do certain things and look at things differently and find ways. Now, in less than a second, George Puel, I remember from Vancouver, they had their own health district, Vancouver Health Districts. At the stroke of the pen, they said, no, we're not doing that anymore. And within a year, it was back to the provincial government. I'm not sure if you remember that. And Burnaby does a lot of similar things. So it all depends on whether you're a casino or non-casino community. But I definitely believe all those ideas could be into some kind of a think tank on council where we could always be front and center of all those things to save taxpayers money. Sometimes they work, and sometimes, believe it or not, Gord, they don't work. So I think you're right on the right track. And as far as the items listed, the function, finance, humor, recreation, arts, and culture, I think all those areas are important to work, and also to make sure we're taking care of it all the time. Those are my points.
Great. So with that, welcome, David. We're just on service areas of interest with the little intro. So in the RCMP, which we provide the administrative support, otherwise RCMP is a contract, are there any areas of interest that council wish to see, a councillor wish to see pursued within the budget or otherwise, just generally? RCMP support, anything?
Good morning, Gordon. Are you talking to me?
No, I'm talking to everybody. I was just welcoming you.
Okay.
But welcome.
Okay, thank you. Should I?
Anything for Kim?
Yeah, I think we've got to add up there for sure the anticipated costs due to contract settlement.
Yeah, okay.
As well as retroactive costs.
Ready? Is it okay?
And right now, RCMP is...
Okay, point of order, Your Worship, point of order. Does Councillor Richter know that this is a publicly streamed meeting? Just want to make sure we're not
Yes,
crossing over.
I do, and I'm talking about what was in a newspaper article in the local, in the regional papers this weekend.
Okay, so it's a point that contract settlement will have to consider costs. That's fine. Okay.
Yes, we will, and the magnitude of those costs could be of such substance that we're not going to be able to afford much more in 2022, other than dealing with this new collective bargaining unit, and that's fine. They've gone through a fair process. We have to acknowledge it, but I think we need to be prepared for the costs. Right now, the RCMP is the largest single budget item we have, and it looks like it's going to become even larger. Those are my comments, and those are all able to be made in the public realm, Councillor Long.
Great, thank you. Yeah, there's two aspects. We got Eric. So one is the RCMP themselves, and the other is the support we provide. And I've got Eric. Hi, Eric.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's important to add. I just want to add again, Gord, I'm not going to say much today, I don't think, because I don't know how this conversation is supposed to be more free flowing. And I think as you've seen here, the challenge you're going to have with, a small subset of us that get interrupted essentially constantly. And so it's very challenging to have a normal informal conversation around some of these items. If someone's going to shout point of order and interrupt people, it's going to be very challenging. So I'd ask you to try to manage that as best you can. Thanks.
Great. Hey, thanks, Eric. Thanks for that. So we'll all take note of that. Again, we're brainstorming. It's called areas of interest, right? So, okay. Anything else for RCMP? So far I have really budget related as opposed to a service area that we need to look at contract settlement costs. Anything else for RCMP? Okay, let's go to
David has
David
has hand up. Yep.
Hey, David. David. David, you're on.
Yeah, he's trying to unmute.
His mouth is not moving.
Yeah, I think it's...
let's watch David, and I'll come back just to keep us moving.
Maybe I can't put my hand up on the screen, so I'll just, if I could just mention something, Gordon.
Yeah, you bet, Jack.
I'll wait for David. Yeah, so good discussion. Certainly things like the budgetary items of a contract, which, fortunately this council has been anticipating, staff have been anticipating building in the budget. However, there will be some adjustments that we'll have to do in the next budget when it comes to the labor settlement that is really out of our control. The other thing is it's difficult, and I think you said we're not down in the kitchen very very much. It's difficult to really analyze some of the jobs that the different functions perform because we don't see the day to day. We as council see items that like recreation is a good one. Public are very in tune with recreation. It's like transit. Everybody, they use a bus, you hear about it, right? Where payroll, we don't hear from the public. So there's items here that really I think are interesting, and I for one don't have all of the expertise in what happens in every department here, but certainly I think flagging things like there is going to be an increase in the contract settlement with the RCB, which has been long overdue. The police, it's been quite a while that they haven't had a settlement. We want to make sure we keep good officers in our force that is finally that they've done something, but municipalities will have to adjust to that. So just my comments. I think those are great. We got to flag those items that are going to be items of concern when it comes to budget. Thanks.
Yeah, good. Thanks. Now, just a parallel, just to give you an example, aside from contract, in many areas across the country, the concern is the visibility of the RCMP, service related. Okay. So what they're doing is considering peace officers to be doing the more visible or doing things that the RCMP can't do. And again, I'm not suggesting that for Langley. I'm just saying there's the contract, which is purely a budget consideration. And then is there any service areas that we have ideas or concerns about? So when increased property crime, for example, in northern Saskatchewan and northern Alberta, the idea is more, boots on the street, so to speak. Or, okay, so let's go to fire. So I'm just going to work through, I'll be guided by the hands. And, Patrina, are we on fire or RCMP?
Fire.
Okay, go, Patrina. You're a lead on fire. Great.
Okay, thank you. Based on the list on B1, I teased out a review of our fire safety in general and protective services. So I wanted to include in that, it mentions emergency preparedness. I think with respect to climate change and the incidences of fire that we've been having, that we need to have more of an emphasis and potentially review our strategy, partly about education, but I think also about design and implementation of different frameworks so that we can prevent as much as possible. So my cost component is on the prevention side, because my feeling is that currently what happens is that if there's a fire incident, a lot of the cost is downloaded to the insured and not necessarily absorbed by those who are, putting the building forward and putting it in our community. So I'd like to reverse the onus in that sense and make it more about what the building design is, what it's structured out of, and anything having to do with prevention on that side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and certainly events as recent as Florida, all these things. I'm going to split that into two. One, the emergency preparedness readiness, and then maybe the emergency prevention i.e. building, etc. Right.
Sounds good.
I've got, I think it was David, then Kim, and Jack, let me know if I got the order wrong, but David?
Yes, thank you. I am concerned with fire prevention. Like if you look at the big fire we had in Willoughby, and then we had another big fire in Willoughby, and maybe those two might be criminal, who knows? But we did, like, look at Lytton. You know, do they need help up there? It's prevention. I mean, I think the police chiefs, the way it's set up seems to be working, other than all of a sudden we don't want to make changes that involve way right hand things. Like if somebody, I'm just saying this, if somebody walked past and threw a match in on both those in Willoughby, you know, we're doing a good job, but it's we've had one of the biggest fires we've ever seen in Langley in the last, you know, and then of course, anyhow, my point is, when it comes to areas of interest, I know the chief would have his own thoughts on this, and maybe I should listen to some things he says. But I am just, areas of interest is making rules on wide spectrums. Like, you know, all of a sudden, are we going to start changing everything because we've had a couple doozers, really potentially bad fires, and we have to be able to fight them, and that's just my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, David. Kim?
Yeah, I guess this is where I'm thinking we're getting off track again. And my concern is, if we're building a wish list here for what it is we want to do, how are we going to afford to do all of this? And I'm really concerned that this particular process is just going to result in a great long list of additional things we want to see done, like additional service enhancements, additional service add-ons, when we're forgetting the big picture. And the big picture is, and from my perspective, the costs of the contract settlement for the RCMP are going to negate, to a large extent, additional services in 2022 in any other area. So I'm reluctant to add to this list anything other than dealing with the RCMP, because if we look back at my list of 19 motions, I mean, my first one was that the property tax rate be set up front before the budget even begins to be dealt with by staff, and that it be limited to cost of living plus 1%. So, I mean, all of these categories should have cost of living plus 1%. And I don't think we're going to be able to do it in the RCMP category, because the overall impact of the costs there are going to be over cost of living plus 1%. So what does that mean to the other areas? So I guess, Gord, I'm back asking, why are we building a wish list here? This is not a good thing to be doing. We should be looking at the realities of what our taxpayers can afford. And I don't think they can afford a 10 or a 15% budget increase next year.
Okay, thanks. So to achieve that, the direction at a previous workshop was, if that's the case, then we need to know what are the areas of interest to make that adjustment. The best we can do so far, and you know, we'll go through the list, but remember, we're brainstorming, we're just ideas, we haven't decided anything. And really on the protective services so far, these three efforts that we've identified would be about future costs, right? So they will not have an immediate impact. One would expect then that they're good ideas, but they're not necessarily things that will affect the 2022 budget. So right now, go back to the list.
I think we need to make that very clear, because often what happens when we generate lists like this, it's
Yeah.
easy for staff to interpret it as saying, this is the direction council wants to go in. Well,
which is,
I don't know if it's the direction council wants to go in.
well, we'll confirm that. But what I've been doing is trying to put the reason they're on there that I'm hearing. And so far, I'm just making a little note in the italics that these are related to future costs and would not necessarily have a big impact on the 2022 budget. And correctly so, they would actually put greater demand on the 2022 budget. So remember, it's about saving costs, saving time, saving future costs, etc. Otherwise, they become more strategic. So fair comment, Kim. And so I'm guided by the list. I think I've got Bob next. Bob?
Yeah, maybe just back up a second here, because, you know, Council Woodward piped up about me calling so if we're going to get through this day, a point of order is not allowed in this meeting. I thought it was a regular council meeting, and I wonder if all of council, perhaps I need to understand what a point of order is. And I almost wanted to yell point of order again, because Councilor Richter is saying stuff that I don't understand.
Okay.
Just a minute, let me finish. Wait a minute. She made a statement that we are going to have cost of living plus 1% increase. So that maybe have been discussed along the line, but if that's where we're at, we may as well just adjourn now. But
it's a free-flowing discussion, and there's been no decision on budgets. We all know that these are ideas that Council Richter's put forward, and I think they're fine. They're for discussion. So I don't think there's a need for points of order, unless it's something that I think you may raise that you were concerned something might have been a closed nature, but was you advised it wasn't. So that's kind of okay. If I was to say something that was mistakenly enclosed, but let's just let it go as a free flowing. I think Gordon is really handling it well, and let's just carry on the discussion. We haven't made any decisions yet, and we're just having discussions.
So where does it go with this cost of living plus 1%? I mean,
I'll leave that with Gordon.
Just so we're clear, there are three parts to today. The first one that actually came from a previous council session was to indicate areas for adjustment, like cutting costs, cutting time, saving time, etc. So those inform the budget. The second was to take a quick look at the priorities. Why? Because if there's any change, that will inform the budget. So now we've got two major pieces. And then the third piece today is the budget, which is around COLA, etc. And, you know, if you recall, we had, I think, a 2-hour, hour and a half discussion about budget last time. So I took up all the notes, and I've actually highlighted in the document you received the yellow areas that we probably need council to have some discussion on. So 3 parts. Service, have you got any areas where you think we ought to take a look at to save costs, save time, save future costs, etc.? Which is totally different than saying we need to expand it, make it better, you know, all that kind of stuff. So that's the first part. Second part will be refresh on the priorities. Just double check, hopefully not take too long. No intent to generate a list of 20 more ideas to unpack today. And then lastly, to get into budget. So that's our agenda. So back to protective services. Are there any other ideas of, let's call them service adjustments that anybody has thoughts about? And again, they're just thoughts, ideas, that's it. And Margaret.
Yeah, so I don't know how, I don't think this affects the budget necessarily, but there's been a lot of talk recently, and you mentioned the download of, you know, provincial, and I guess I'm thinking about the BC ambulance and how the lack of service is impacting our fire department. So I don't know if that is going to impact, you know, what, you know, potentially, you know, what their needs will be, but hopefully, you know, that's something that we probably should be at least aware of.
Yeah. And again, that could relate to, if we don't do, you know, we need to advocate, right? And, you know, I've been saying this all across the country. It's not fire and rescue anymore. It's rescue and fire, right? Yeah, absolutely. So let's check on that status. It has a huge impact. And that's a prevention, right? If we can make sure we advocate through UBCM or all that, to make sure that's taken care of, it reduces a burden. Okay,
Yeah.
good one. Thanks, Margaret. Reduce. Just making a note. Okay. See anybody else, Jack? Okay. On engineering. Engineering and capital projects, thoughts? Yep. And just gonna.
Sure.
Yep. Anybody?
Patrina has her hand up.
Oh,
And
thanks,
then Kim.
Katrina. Thanks for that, Jack.
Yes, thank you. I know this is an emerging area, but I want to talk about the parks and open space. I think it's important that as staff works through a report, that there's a more fulsome understanding regarding the degree to which certain green spaces and park elements can be delivered by the development community. I know it has been somewhat problematic in our initial understanding of that, but I think that's one way that we can relieve the burden of the necessity of providing parks and green space areas, which we need, but not have to pay for it out of that particular budget. So development would pay for that on off-siting.
Right.
Thank you.
And that would, again, reduce potential costs, right? Okay. Thank you, Katrina. I get some. And Kim.
Yeah, we've done a fair bit of work through the last year on tree protection and canopy management, and it's clear that there are additional arborists that are needed in order to make the tree bylaw and the canopy protection management program work. So tree protection canopy management needs to be put in there. But I'd also like, again, to say, in this particular area, we need to keep costs, down, because to me, this is the fastest growing area of costs. And we need not the tree protection, the whole engineering and capital projects. And so if we're going to make an overall budget of cost of living plus 1%, we have to cut somewhere. So is an audit needed on these engineering and capital projects? If we, like, what absolutely has to be added in and what can we take out in order to finance what has to be added in? The other thing that has to be added in is the climate change program elements. So again, what can we take out to finance the things that have to be there?
So if I've got it right, Kim, making sure we're clear on priorities, right?
Well, everything's a priority, Gord. That's the problem.
Well,
it's what is more of a priority than others.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we just end up building more extensive lists.
Yeah.
And we don't ever drop anything off.
How about if so we need to have clear, maybe just change that, because if everything's a priority, we have none. So criteria, okay. And climate change, do we have a plan?
Yes, we do. And it's costing us $130 per household per year over the next 10 years.
Okay. So again, the same thing, setting criteria. Okay. I've got Bob, then Patrina.
Yeah, okay, Mr. McIntosh, I hear it again. So are we going to just continue to hear this 1% on top of COLA? Because if that is, then we can just maybe cut to that one. And like, why do I keep hearing that? So I've mentioned it, that I don't know that that's a policy. I don't believe it is. If it is, that's news to me. I've heard it several times in the meeting. So where is that coming from?
Okay, so let's be clear. Just declare now that we will get to budget considerations in part 3. Okay, Katrina?
Yeah, thank you. Just going back to Kim's comments. So I'm wondering, and it may offend some of the other employment principles we have, but this idea of cooperative programs where we can get students that are already undertaking an education, for example, around trees and horticulture, using them to be part of our process. So it's a cooperative venture. And at the same time, we'd be helping to train potential future staff. But I would assume that there are universities that would have programs that help to facilitate this kind of activity so that students could get some working experience in that area.
Right. So I'll just put student, apprentice, that kind of thing. Great. Okay. Thanks, Katrina. Margaret, and then back to Bob, or unless your hand's still up. Margaret?
Yeah, so recently, again, the province, I believe, took away a certain grant for each community. So I think that's going to really have, and it has to do with the climate action initiative. So that would potentially also have an impact, and we may have to adjust for missing those grants. I can't remember what it's called, but somebody can probably help me out with that.
So it was related to climate adaptation?
So point of order is, the acronym is CARIP.
Thank you, Katrina. I knew you.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks, Margaret. Yeah.
So the CARIB grant.
Sorry, that's a P as opposed to a B. Sorry. CARIP. Otherwise, it looks like we're going to the Caribbean.
Can you, what does the acronym stand for again? Just refresh our memories. You're muted.
Climate Action Revenue Incentive Program. CARIP. Uh-oh. What happened? Have I been kicked out?
No, we just lost screen share.
Oh, sorry.
Well, mine froze actually, and I couldn't actually hear anybody for about 30 seconds. So I don't know.
Did you hear the name of the Climate Action Revenue Incentive? Yeah. Oh, good. Okay, yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
Gord, you're on mute. I don't know if you're speaking. Gord.
All my settings just changed there for some reason. Okay. Can you see the screen, or do I have to share it again?
You've shared again. Yeah.
Yeah. Here we go.
Gremlin's got in there.
Okay. Here we go.
How
we doing?
We got it. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. I think we just got the royal boot there. Okay. So again, a good one. That's really about revenue. You know, like if it's at risk, how do we try and get that grant back? That's about revenue. So that's okay. So how do we maximize revenue? How do we cut costs? That's our focus for today, right? Kim.
Yeah, I just had a question around protective services. Well, am I muted? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. What about bylaws? Because one of the things that we've seen is that through this COVID period is the increasing pressure on bylaws. People are at home more. They're noticing things in their community they want fixed. So I think bylaws has to come in there somewhere.
What are you thinking? Like how to prioritize responses and volume?
I'm thinking that the model that we're using, which is a reactive model,
right?
Other communities like Surrey are using a proactive model. Maybe we need, by virtue of our size, to move towards more proactive than reactive. But that's going to be costly. And again, if we're going to move in that direction, we have to cut other things out, in my opinion, to make that cost of living plus 1% tax standard that I want to see in place happen.
Okay. Yeah, and now what some places are doing is, notwithstanding proactive, reactive, is they're changing the response model. So if it, so it's very clear. It's what's the response time to investigate? What's the response time to validate? What's the response time to mediate? So different ways, and certainly we're noticing more and more people, at home now, noticing that. So thanks, and it's okay to go back, as our thinking. The last one we had was, the CAREB grant status as a revenue source. And so we're going to move to community development, if that's okay. But anybody, anytime, you can go backwards to one that we've already covered. So on community development, and I think that might be Kim's hand still up, or do you have one?
No, I have one for this one.
Okay, great, go.
And what I want to see is better crossover between planning and engineering on tree and canopy protection. Because if planning can come in and recommend wholesale slaughter of 4,000 trees on one property, at the same time as engineering is trying to protect trees, then something's not right here. And why are we spending time even doing a canopy strategy?
Great, thanks. Anything else for community development? And
No, I do.
yeah, Bob?
Yeah, well, I don't know if this would fit under community development, but I'm wondering if, if quite often, let me just say that, I might as well just let it out because I need to get something out of this meeting too, okay? So quite often council goes down these rabbit holes constantly. There's different things, and I won't be specific because they're just too numerous to mention. So I don't know where in on your list it might be useful to have a workshop with a parliamentarian or somebody that can point out how to properly conduct a meeting so that everyone's point of view can be put forward, and when people hear things that concern them, that can be addressed so that we get the right information. Because really, at the end of the day, staff are trying to take direction from council, and if council's all over the place, Gordon, I think you know what I'm trying to say. So is there a place in that? Because that could cost us an awful lot of money, and I don't have the time and patience to go back, but I bet you over the last 20 years, I could find plenty of examples where direction has been misinterpreted or whatever, or council has these interactions with each other, and that all costs money in the end. So if you run a better meeting, that'd be better.
No, it's good. So I do have a blank spot. So far I put the task force think tank. That's a overarching idea. Patrina, I put the use of cooperative students here because it could apply to a lot of things, right? And then council requests, kind of the volume management is there. And Patrina's next.
Well, thank you. Yes, it's helpful, I think, to have this conversation because then it's sort of like jazz, you riff off each other. So I'm thinking of green infrastructure. So I know we have a lot of green infrastructure in the township, but I think that we'd be better served if we could move forward with bylaw. I know this is something that would take staff time, but I think that there are a lot of financial advantages to going ahead to do that. But the model has to be put forward that the economics of green infrastructure more than pay for themselves in the end in terms of what the community gets as a benefit from that. So I just want to say that green infrastructure is great there as a topic area, but I think we need to be advancing that in all our new neighborhoods because that is the way that, simplistically speaking, we're particularly going to be able to help to mitigate some of the effects of climate change, but also provide public amenities as a result of doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, for some of these, what I was thinking, you know, again, we're freewheeling, brainstorming. That sounds like a strategic item. And so I'm just going to highlight it, and I'll highlight the one that is related to saving costs, increasing revenue. I just got to figure out how to get there. Kim, you're next.
Yeah, and just to pick up on Councillor Arneson's thoughts, in addition to green infrastructure, we have talked in the past about green roofs. They're very expensive. I like them, but developers don't. But we've got all these roofs of all these new buildings and the higher buildings that we're building. I'd like to see us require all roofs going forward to be solar panel ready. I think that'll be a big step forward for our climate action or our climate change program. And readiness, yeah, solar panel readiness on roofs. And I just wanted to go back to the comment that was made about parliamentarians. I think that the mayor does a stellar job, and he has throughout this entire term, on running the meetings. I don't think we need to have parliamentary assistance at all. I do think there are probably, well, definitely one, maybe a couple of councillors who might benefit from taking a parliamentary course, but council offers parliamentary training to all new councillors, and I don't think that we need to put council through a parliamentary session, a parliamentary training session. We've all had it, but I do think that maybe some people on council could be given access to additional training if they so need it. The mayor, in my opinion, is not one of them. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm still sticking with community development. And again, I'm trying to highlight when we've how these are related to our quest around budget, right? Budget, saving time, saving money, saving costs, saving future costs, increasing revenue. Remember, that's our focus. Yep.
I see David on the list, and then if you can put me on David. After him. Yeah.
David?
Yes, thank you. You know, maybe I'm a little out of line here. I heard Councillor Richter talk about roofs, solar panel ready roofs and green roofs. Is that got anything to do with community development, or am I going down the wrong rabbit hole? Because can I just talk about it for half a second?
You bet. You're on.
Okay. Roofs are unbelievably important on any building, and the time to buy into technology is like when you're painting a house. The time to change the color is when you're painting it, not just, well, let's change the color now, let's paint it. But when it needs to be painted, that's the time to change the color. Solar panel roofs are something that I think, and I'm going to use myself as an example here, because I don't want to start, finger pointing, because I think Jack is older than I am. But when the older you get, the more kind of that was a joke. But solar panel roofs on my roof in this old house, this is what I think. Oh, it's an old house. You know, who cares? We just gotta milk more cows and pay for it. But that's such a bad developers. The time to put on a green roof is actually, I've heard this before, and I'm not an expert on it, but I know that other councillors have had more experience with it. Green roofs actually pay. I don't know if they pay themselves. I don't want to say things that people can argue with. But a green roof, we are building so many big buildings. We are going to be building more and more buildings that are huge. Maybe we should get a little tougher on green roofs. Maybe we should get a little tougher on this solar panel roofing, because if we go up 4 stories or 5 or 6 in Willoughby, if you can put a solar panel on there and cut your power usage in half, who saves the money? We all kind of do, because then we can sell more power. Anyhow, my point is, short and dry, without trying to dazzle everybody, roofs, green roofs and solar roofs, I think we should take a better look at and make it a little tougher, so that developers at the time of building the roof can put that technology into place. And we need to know more about green roofs and solar panel roofs, so that because it may be that no, it doesn't work. I don't want to start an argument again, but do you guys get the idea? Very important, and I think that's the time to look at it. Thank you.
Thank you. Sounds like, I'm just going to throw this out there. I'm noting now, because we're brainstorming, right? Every idea is a good idea. The ones that require strategic discussion, I'm underlining them, right? Because again, today, areas of interest relative to saving costs, saving future costs, increasing revenue, saving time, okay? But every idea is a good idea, so just trying to make a note of that. And we got Steve.
Well, yeah, I think it's great to discuss all these things. I mean, it's actually like a discussion topic that we have. I mean, green roofs, solar energy power. I mean, we have a lot of sun right now, not necessarily a lot during the winter. Also, that's another study in itself. It's like when you sit down, you want to build something, you have to put together your budget. And it's the same as whether you're building a garage or if you're building a 20-story building. You have to figure out what works best. And I know that the hydro system is a hydro-powered system, and it provides an area for our electrical uses. Solar power, again, that could be expensive as well. So it depends on what we have to be as pragmatic, what works best for certain companies and what works best for us as well. So it's good to talk about those things, but it's important to understand you don't want, it all comes back on the homeowner. So if a developer wants to put in those type of units, they could indeed be more money than hydro. So we have to be careful of that. It's not the same thing as having a hookup for your vehicle. This is very, very, I don't even know of any cities that I'm aware of. We have to study that as well. So it's all good discussion. Also I'm deviating a bit, Gord, but I did know that we don't have a plan for a cost of living plus 1% yet. That we've discussed it many times, and it's a good idea. And also, I've said it to as long as I've been around, what do we need to cut? And, there's a number of things we can cut, but I'm not sure if that would be something that the public would want to do. So cutting costs and cutting services are very, very difficult to do, but we still need to discuss them. And that's why I use the example of switching over from years ago from our own sewage treatment plant to Metro Vancouver saved us millions of dollars, but that's a one-shot deal. We don't get those kind of shots very often. And I keep saying we're a non-casino community. We don't have the millions and millions and millions of dollars, and almost emphasizing that the people like Richmond, Coquitlam, Burnaby have, and to a lesser degree, the city of Langley. But anyway, those are my comments.
Well, you did make one comment, which is that is the purpose of today, is are there areas the council wishes to pursue to cut costs? That's specifically what we're doing today. So I'm going to move us out of green.
Gord, I can't put my hand up, so I'll just jump in now.
I see it. So I'm going to move us out of green infrastructure. Hopefully that's a strategic item. And Jack, you're on.
Yeah, so looking through community development, the items that you've listed here, they're pretty much all, I think they're all cost recovery. There's fees for building permits, there's fees for inspection, there's fees for just about everything in here. And I think one thing and this is really staff when they're reviewing their costs and fees, is to ensure that all the costs are covered in those fees. I think it's important because, and the costs go beyond just the person going out and making the inspection. The cost goes, there's a lot of what do you call it? Fixed expenses, so to speak. There's the operating expenses of the personnel who do the work and their wages and salaries and all of that. There's also other costs that the township bears that are, for example, would be corporate administration. There's always a piece of that could be allocated to each one of these. I think they're doing that, but I think it's important that when staff are developing their budget, developing their fees and services and the costs, that they're ensuring that these are all cost recovery, and not just for the service, but incorporate, ensure that other areas of the township that are necessary, like corporate administration, like payroll, like all the things that keep it running, are included in those costs. So these items, isn't really a budget item. It should be bringing revenue in.
Great,
My comments.
good one. Yeah, so total cost center, making sure total cost recovery, cost center, complete cost center allocations. Great, absolutely on target to what we're doing today. That's great. Anybody else on community development? No, I should have done sort of our housekeeping item, and a 5-minute stretch. And is that okay for everybody? 5-minute stretch, and then we're going to head in. I know we've got sort of the administrative, then we've got recreation, arts and culture, and then that will conclude, and any general thoughts, that will conclude our service areas of interest. But again, I'm going to remind everybody, no value, no judgment. We're brainstorming, and we're looking for saving costs, saving future costs, finding revenue, saving time. If there are other items that come up, which of course is your prerogative, and they're strategic, I'm going to note them as strategic, but let's not dwell on them. This is not a strategy discussion day. So let's do a time check, just quick 5-minute stretch. We're going to head to noon for a half-hour break, or should we go to 12:15? Would that work for everybody?
Sure.
Okay.
Take a break now, then go to 12:15.
Yeah, we'll take 5 minutes now, and then we'll do a run to 12:15, kind of wrap this up, and we want to make sure we get on to budget discussions. So I've got 11:22, and hey, why don't we do on the half hour, 11:30, 8 minutes. How's that? 11:30, okay. I think we're good, Jack. So we'll come back to in more sort of the internal areas, finance, HR. But again, if there's general ideas that come up, we'll find a place to locate. So I'm kind of in the finance, HR area. Any areas for attention of interest? Often a little harder for counselors. So let me leave that one there and just see, if anybody wants to get back to it. Let's go to, Kim.
Yeah, I'd like to put up under finance, Office of an Auditor General.
Like creation?
Yeah. The city of Vancouver's done this. I think it's an excellent idea. And particularly in the context of like reviewing projects and project costs.
Mm-hmm.
And again, with an emphasis on cost reductions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Be strategic first, but in the long run, future costs, right? Future costs. Okay, great, thanks.
And also, again, and we've talked about this before, debt management and land acquisition.
Sorry, say that again, Kim.
Debt management strategy.
Sorry. I was
and land acquisition.
Yeah. I had I heard them both together. So debt management strategy, policy.
Strategy and land acquisition strategy. And again, both with a focus on costs.
Yeah, save costs.
Keeping costs down, yeah.
Yeah, on the land acquisition.
Yep.
Sorry, I got a plane outside.
Maybe call it land management strategy instead of acquisition.
Sure.
It's more about disposing of what we don't need and collecting what we do need.
Yeah, so in a way, save costs and revenue, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Save costs, to maintain it, and revenue, increase revenue. Okay, good. See any other hands, Jack?
Petrino.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Jack. So I had a comment actually further to Kim's comment, and I've long thought that the Township of Langley should review other models in communities where they have a body that is arm length to council, would have council participation and staff, but they'd be independent and they would give council advice on strategic land investments and disposal. So the idea is that we would get expert advice on our land inventory and what it is that is being recommended for purchase and also what is recommended for disposal, giving us a better sense of a business model of how we're going about that.
Great, thanks, Kim. Is it okay if I put panel, just to keep it short? Some kind of expertise, right, to guide us. Okay.
Steve is next.
You go, Steve.
Yeah, I think a lot of these are also good ideas to talk about. Now, as far as the strategic for future costs and things like that, I have a couple of, but I was wondering, sometimes the federal and provincial government have a way of helping us out or not helping us out for that. And Gord, I know you're close to queries and a number of things. There is something on a minister's desk even today about some sort of a amalgamation between fire and police, fire and ambulance services. And I know that if you look at other models for, I'm not sure what other provinces, but certainly in some of the states, United States, that's a mechanism for saving money. So instead of a couple of fire trucks and a couple of ambulance chasing after a senior that happened a couple of weeks ago, who's having a choking incident, I was wondering, Gord, if you knew if that's still in the works at the provincial government level.
No, I don't.
Because there's an example of, cutting costs. I mean, sometimes we're caught up when the alarm goes, we have police, fire, and ambulance chasing something, and it's not a good thing. We can certainly, that's something that can be looked at. And also, as far as is other services, I like the idea of looking at a way of reducing costs and future costs, and all of those things. Saving money in recreation, and also saving money in other things. But it all comes down to, what services can we cut? Essential services, utility services, recreational services, road services, and the list goes on and on. We have to be very, very careful what we can cut and what we cannot cut. I called it a number of years ago a decision tree that council would have to do. Sit down and what decisions can we make in the future, and that's worked out very well. The decision tree of what service. Anyway, those are my comments right now. Thank you.
And again, if you have specific, you mentioned there's a whole bunch, but what we're looking for is specifics. There's specific areas that think might be worthy to look at. So, thanks, Steve. And Jack, anybody else? I'm staying on the shared screen here, not looking.
Yeah, no, I don't see anybody else. Thanks.
Okay. So let's go to recreation. Are there any specific services, revenue, save costs, save future costs, save time? In recreation services. We could probably put arts and culture, like put them all together. So arts, culture, community initiatives, community grants, recreation.
Yeah, this is a pretty big area. A lot of those, again, it comes back to fees, making sure that the programs that we have are cost recovery, unless there's some reason that council wants to subsidize for certain demographics, which we do have in place for those who can afford the program. So again, I think a lot of it is ensuring that there is a cost recovery in our fees. But again, we know that a lot of these facilities are subsidized to give the community the amenities that people want, and it gets paid through tax dollars. But again, it's a balance that council has come with. We've got Patrina and Steve. So
thanks.
Start with Patrina.
Patrina?
Oh, thank you. It occurs to me, actually, my comment was going to be broader about developing partnering arrangements to finance new recreation infrastructure. However, I brought this up before, and I'm not sure how widely it would be applicable, but this idea that if the township is spending extraordinary funds beyond our immediate needs to create enhanced facilities for the purpose of sponsoring broader games, the Olympic, Seniors Olympics, whatever it may be, that we should have a way to create a surcharge similar to airports putting on a little bit of an extra amount for everybody that uses that facility. Because I think that, beyond our own immediate needs, it's helpful to have some further dollars flowing in to help to offset some of those extra costs that we wouldn't otherwise have.
And so where would you apply this surcharge?
At the ticketing phase.
Okay.
So for special events, say you're having a regional event or provincial or even a national or international event, I would put it right on the ticket.
Okay.
That it's like $5 extra or $2 or whatever it is. Yeah, thank you.
So no matter who was organizing it, there would be that. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, special event levy. Okay. And that would be to increase revenue, right? Hey, thanks, Patrina. Right on target. So far we've got
Steve.
Yeah,
Steve, Kim, David. Yeah.
So thank you again. I think that there's a need out there, and it's a discussion, and has been discussion for many years for arts and cultural community. It's some sort of a service, either an area for them to perform or an area to them to discuss their projects and I guess live performances and other things. So that's something that has been in the works and been discussed, and we're continue discussing, but that should be front and center. I also suggested, I know we have a new, I guess, a museum coming in Fort Langley, and in conjunction with the Kwantlen First Nation as well. So there's something going on there. We've actually clearing some of the land right now as we speak, so that is ongoing. I also said a suggestion that, you know, whenever you go, I notice that in the United States sometimes, and perhaps throughout Canada, is that people providing an area where you can donate, you know, by donation. So if you like this facility, if you like the park, if you like, you can donate, and a little bit of list how that's helpful. I'm that anyway, because I might want myself for one, you know, walking through a public area, and they say if you want to donate, so I threw some coins in there. So anyway, it's another idea, but those are my points right now.
Right. So I'll put that in general. You know, use of a donation option or a collection box. Great. Jack, anybody else?
Kim, and then David. Kim.
Thank you. And under recreation and arts, culture, and community initiatives, I think we need to identify areas of provincial download and be more proactive in seeking provincial and possibly federal subsidies to help us carry out these downloaded areas. And one of the things that has come up quite recently has been the whole $10 a day daycare. I certainly support that initiative. And I think the township could do an excellent job running some of those programs. But I think we should be doing it with federal or provincial dollars, not property tax dollars.
So
provincial downloads, yeah.
Yeah. So I'll put that generally because it could apply to looking at offloading / downloading, all kinds of different areas.
Yeah. If other levels of government have made it clear that these are their priorities to achieve, then they should achieve it. If they want to farm it out to us and pay for it, I think we should do it. But they need to be paying us to do it.
Yeah. Are you... You know, we've talked about this in the past, this sidebar. Is this you're required to do them or?
Well, that hasn't been determined yet. But basically, they're saying they want $10 a day daycare as an example. Now, are they going to put the programs in place? And are they going to fund their own programs, or are they going to attempt to download them to us without funding? Yeah. And that's what I think we need to resist. I don't mind if we run the programs, but if it's their policy and their priority, they pay for it.
Yeah. So the reason I was asking, I was thinking of almost two different points. One would be the township service mandate being very clear, provincial requests, right? You know, provincial, you know, so one, I think what's happening, you know, across the country again is as municipalities saying, oh, well, that's fine, but you know what, it doesn't fit in our service mandate. Like, you know, it's a conscious decision to not accept it, right? Or unless it's forced. So maybe two different hits. Okay. So,
yeah, and I think also with regards to reconciliation from the federal level, there's stuff that's coming onto our table with the expectation we're going to fund it without compensation from the responsible level of government.
Yeah. So why don't we put, so I give it two different hits. One is, you know, if they're offloading or downloading, you know, where's the revenue? And then if they're not doing that, are we clear when do we allow that to go into our mandate? It's called
Yeah.
service creep, right? And we've got our
Yeah.
own service creep without without other people asking. Okay.
Very true.
Okay. Good one. So we're gonna, and we're hearing, I think, some general ideas that are useful as well, as opposed, specific ideas, but also. So the arts and culture venue or perform pack or whatever, I put that as a strategic item, as opposed to a increased revenue or save costs. On recreation, arts, culture, and community initiatives. Now, just a reminder, one of the things that came up previously was, in fact, reviewing the grants and aid or community grants to ensure A, they're eligible, B, it's really needed, and C, that they're accountable for it. So, not sure if that's of interest to people.
I do have David's hand is up.
David?
Hi, thank you. I don't have any answers, but I just reacting to some notes I took under Recs and Arts. Jack had mentioned cost recovery. Like we built a new pool, we're building a new museum, we're going to try to build an art center. We're spending an awful lot of capital that's capital versus budget or maintenance. And I don't have any answers, but unfortunately in recs and arts, that can cost us money. And it depends how it's done. We know that the Langley Event Center, the model that we use for that, Jason has got that either tuned up. Well, actually with COVID, it's slowed down, but we need to look at how that works, why it works, and all that sort of stuff. And I'm not too big on, say, a committee or a panel, like was mentioned about the land buying and selling, because once you get the people to get somebody in there on a committee, generally you get what you pay for. If somebody volunteers, maybe you're not going to have the best guy telling you, well, you should buy this, you should sell that. But the people that are in the know, that are really good at it, they're going to come at a cost. Well, some sort of a cost. So I think that this subject that we're talking about is very temperamental. We there are ways to do it, and like I say, the from the reports we get back in the last 3 or 4 years, or 2 or 3 years, well, like that darn Aldergrove pool. Boy, I drove by it yesterday and I thought, oh boy, we're just losing, we're tanking there, and that's only because of COVID. But so the models that we look at in the future for cost recovery can be very, very serious in how we put them in. Just a comment. I don't know how you can even classify that, but just my comments. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so when there's a new facility, making sure we're clear on the operational model, or is that kind of?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, and you don't want to flip a coin. You don't want to just say, oh, well, that was outhouse luck. We've got to kind of be, what's the words I'm looking for? Everything has to be absolutely analysis. You don't want to go, well, I know this isn't maybe off track, but like the Fort Langley pool, and I don't even want to bring it up, but we got to watch where we go with that thing. We don't want to say anything because pretty soon we're misleading everybody, and we've got to have a model that a model that is tried, true, and tested, that we can get a higher recovery cost, like Jack is kind of saying. So it's got to be, we've got to have the right people saying, hey, we know this model works. So yeah, before we actually get in there, you know, because capital, you know, we can spend capital, but after the first year, when the capital's done, we have to then put it in operating, you know, and that's where the trouble lies right there. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So I put that in, you know, a solid business case regarding the ongoing, you know, beyond capital. Thanks, David. Jack?
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I know David will recall we did prior to the Aldergrove pool increase a budget envelope for operations. So we know that it's not 100% carried by the fees and admission fees and rentals. It's, you know, we did build that in, and I think for certain items like that, you can't get 100% cost recovery. However, it's important that we ensure we've got the proper mix of tax dollars for amenities like a pool or a museum or that kind of thing, because they do carry a cost, but they're also part of what the residents want to see in their community. So yeah, there's that balance. That's all I was trying to say. But we did, David will remember, we did build in operating over a couple of years prior to it opening, so we would have that in our budget envelope.
Yes. Yeah. Good plan.
Yeah, Patrina's next.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I want to build on the infrastructure side of the decisions that we make when we decide to go ahead with a recreational facility of some type. And I'm struck by the fact that generally speaking, I don't believe what we currently do in terms of projection and budgeting is to provide a fixed or generalized amount for the future repairs of the building. So to have a reserve fund so that you know, rather than just looking at it on a yearly basis, you understand that based on the warranty, for example, on a new roof, that you've got 20 years, and subsequent to that, you must have some money set aside for the purpose of putting a new roof on, because I find it very frustrating, as I imagine others would, that on a yearly basis, something goes into the important or critical category and there's no money in the budget to pay for that. So I think what we need to do is to harmonize those two elements together. So if you're looking at the outright cost of the new building, at the same time, you have to project out on the budget year when you're going to anticipate to have that money. So it's similar to our other reserve funds, but that it must be tied and earmarked for that purpose so that we have the money ready when it's necessary for that. Okay.
Yeah, so I put it in both places, Patrina. So when we have a new facility, beyond the capital costs, we've got the ongoing operational model and replacement, but also making sure we have adequate reserve funds, you know, for prevention, et cetera. Great.
Steve's next.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, Gordon, I just wanted to double check it. So sometimes you were going to check in with staff as well, because some of these things, there are answers rather than going over. I know that, for example, there's a fire truck reserve. If something goes wrong with a fire truck or something, we do have some contingency. So you might want to double check with staff as what we have and what we don't have.
Yep. And of course, today is primarily, this is really back to that earlier comment. These will be ideas only. That then staff can take a look at. You're right, come back with some analysis if we agree. And just a reminder, we would be picking out of here anything that would save costs or increase revenue. The strategic items would be extracted because for a different discussion. Anything else on recreation, arts, and culture? I'm going to leave corporate as general, and you can tell that I put vehicle replacement, validation, and life extension on there already, and that was from the list that Kim had, so just making a note of that. So arts, culture, recreation, corporate, or open season. Are there any other areas of interest that staff ought to be looking at, not only to save costs and generate revenue? And let's go do a quick round table just to make sure we've got everybody. Just kind of anything else come to mind as we kind of wrap this round. And Bob, anything on your mind of areas that, hey, I've been wondering whether we could do that differently, save some costs, generate revenue? Bob?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Great, thanks. Eric?
No, I would say I have quite a few, but probably save them for another time. Thanks.
Okay. Steve?
I'm fine, thanks.
Katrina?
Yes, thank you. This may be something you have to check with staff that's already underway, but under corporate administration, there's the filming. And I think with the recent boom in filming that we have in our community, a review for the fees that we can collect and maybe some potential to extract some further dollar amount for the value of, I know we get value from them being in the community, but also to enhance our financial purse for the benefit of community amenities that we continue to need. So just to review that process to see if we could get some more funding.
Great.
Thank you.
Good one. Thank you. Margaret?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
And David?
Yeah, I'm sorry I was late. I'm still a little, I'm doing okay. I'm trying to follow, and I'm, as usual, I'm 10 minutes late and $5 short. Okay,
Yeah.
but I'm carry on. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, just a reminder, all we're doing is identifying areas where we've been wondering, thinking out loud, that can we save costs? Can we increase revenue, save time? That's all we're doing. And they're just areas of interest that then staff will take a look at. And I was David, and I think I got everybody. Jack?
No, you get me.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, Katrina. Go, Katrina.
Oh, sorry, Katrina.
It was Kim that said something.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Kim.
Thanks.
Sorry.
Two things. Number one is that we should be going back through projects that we've kind of put on the list that we want to move forward with, but I think we need to revisit those projects, such as replacement fire halls, new ops centers, community policing, or they're like, it's like a whole separate leased area for a police presence in different parts of the township. So I think we need to go back and review those and see how much we can actually afford to do, given some of the things that are now on the horizon. And again, I go back to the RCMP costs being on the horizon. The other comment that I'd like to make is of my 19 motions from April, the April 19th motion meeting, we haven't really touched on any of those. I mean, I've brought up the cost of living plus 1%, but the other ones haven't really been addressed at all here. So I'm assuming we're going to get to it later, right?
Well, I looked at the list. I highlighted the vehicle replacement, which you had, but all the rest seem to be entirely budget related.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, this was it, because what we've done here is we've set some strategic directions again, but it's the implementation of those directions that gets us into the budget. So it's almost like we need a tactical level about how we're going to handle the budget.
Mm-hmm. Which is coming up very shortly, hopefully.
Okay, thank you.
Hopefully, but we'll check in and make sure that's the case. So I'm going to wrap up that at this point.
Oh, I cut the mayor off, so he has.
Oh, yeah, you're right, Kim. Thanks, Jack.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I just want to make sure every member council had an opportunity.
Yeah. So
yeah, certainly I got a lot of things too, and I'd like to bring them up now because now's a really good time to discuss them. Certainly, there's things we can look at, and just looking down the list, protective services. Our firefighters go out to battle a huge blaze. Are we recovering from the insurance company? Are we able to bill back to those that have the fire? And there's some creative ways to bring back some revenue. Talked about making sure that all of our services that we provide, especially to building and development community, are adequately covered, and that we're getting revenues back in, that we're not impacting the taxpayers on those. So I think those are really things that we can focus on to make sure that the revenue is coming in at the right place. Those are just some ideas. It goes in recreation programs I mentioned, although some of those are certainly subsidized, but ensuring that we have good. So on the one side is getting that income in, making sure that we have adequate staff to look for grant applications and grant opportunities in which they come and go. And I know our staff are always looking for those, but ensure that we are applying for and getting those grant applications in, because that's the other big part of municipal income are grants when it comes to infrastructure and projects, that kind of thing. Those are really important. And then we rely back on the taxpayer to cover the gaps. And we are stuck with, as I mentioned, the contract settlement with the RCMP with collective agreements, that our biggest cost driver is our wages, and how we manage that and incorporate that and make sure that everyone understands that cost driver. So I think it's a good discussion, just to kind of a base and review. And again, then there's services that we could cut back if we feel that that's important to cut back. And again, there's always that risk of backlash from the community says, no, we like that service. When I drive through the Township of Langley, I see how neat and tidy it is. I think our infrastructure is well maintained, and I go to other municipalities and I see weeds growing everywhere. The roads aren't kept up. The sidewalks aren't kept up. So there's always that balance, and I think how we move through it. But it's been a good session to set a base. So thanks, Gordon.
Thanks. Mark, and on to staff, any other, I know you've got ideas as well, if you'd like to bring any up or any comments, and we'll start off with Mark before we wrap up this round.
So thanks, Gord. Going with your original instructions, we're trying to listen and observe, and I think it's good to have the brainstorming sessions, and I'm sure we'll have some comments in the budget sessions in terms of some of the opportunities and challenges. But right now, I think we want to keep going with the flow. But I'll see if Jason or Raman have anything they want to add at this point, keeping in mind we probably will have a few things later.
Great, thank you. Raman?
Nothing to add. Thank you so much.
Jason?
Nope, nothing else. Thanks.
And I think Sandra's there as well, right?
Yes, I am. And no, I don't have anything else to add at this time.
Great. So we're going to close that round. Those will be items that I'll extract the cost saving and revenue ones for staff discussion and kind of report back. So, and I think if let's take, we kind of talked about 12:15. So let's take a look at the strategic update. I'm just going to go full slideshow here just for a minute. So strategic update is really just a kind of a quick check. If you recall, it's not just about the priorities. We had talked about every request for decision coming from council should say, how does this impact the staff work program? That's really about ongoing. We talked about a direction request or request for clarity, that before staff go off doing work, that they have clarity around from a council, not just a councillor perspective. We did sort the CPC items, looking at kind of that more regular casual conversation, and we created a list. And we also talked about using a follow-up action list so that these individual requests or notices of motion that are coming through council could be logged, and so we can see the volume of these items. As well, of course, we've been talking about trying to keep our dashboard, if you will, current. And here it is in front of us. And we've got just a quick check-in. We have the ASC district recommendation. I don't think any change, Jason, if I understand it. That's coming in September.
That's correct, Gord.
Okay.
We're undertaking a little bit of public consultation and back in early fall.
Okay, and the budget guidance, we're item number 3, so we're shortly after lunch getting into that. COVID recovery was more looking at community and organizational impact analysis more for December. If we've got it right, the water policy relative to Metro, that decision, I understand, has been made. So potentially, unless there's other items, that comes off. And the other area that we had on your hit list was to indicate areas of interest for service levels. And so effectively, if that's the case, we would now expect to see a report back to Kim's earlier comment. So that would pretty much put 2 items, perhaps, and we're now with 3 items. We then had, let me first of all check on those now items. Is everybody okay with that quick update?
Kim has her hand up.
Great, Kim?
Actually, I just wanted to flag an item with regards to the CPC.
Good.
And we've had a couple of CPC meetings where we have actually reversed our decisions. We've spent time in CPC going through it, coming to a decision, referring it to council, and when it comes back on the council table, some of those items are reversed. So I'm flagging the effectiveness of CPC. I don't think this necessarily belongs on this meeting agenda, but I think it needs to go on a list for discussion by council at some future date.
Okay, thanks, Kim. Thank you for that. Sorry, just Kim. Thanks.
Bob
on the now items, Bob.
No, I'd like to. Yeah, I wanted to comment on that. I mean, I guess you can look at all these things with 2 ends, 2 sides of the coin, don't you? So extra discussion about items allows council to deliberate further on particular initiatives, and as has been pointed out many a time by certain councils, we're unfettered in our decision making. So I think that the council priority meetings are actually very beneficial in exploring deeply into issues. So I just need to make that comment to balance the one that was just given. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam, for
ongoing. Always remember we talked that if you recall that we were going to try and prioritize CPC items, and we were going to give it, if I recall, 6 months, and then come back to kind of do a review. And so I think we could put that on the follow-up action list. So back to our list. It's possible that given council's discussion that this item and this item, notwithstanding a staff report coming back, may very well be shortly off this list. We then had next items, and so some guidance may be worthy of any items that you think should come forward for consideration in the now. Out of, and in particular, we're talking about, I believe, unless it's changed, these items. So does anybody see...
Maybe I can say something. Yeah, the water policy, we did have a good discussion on that, and some decisions were made. So number 4, I see you cross it out. It probably could come off. Now, that means we can move something up.
That's right.
Horn pit housing, there's been lots of discussion around that for a couple of reasons. One is to provide housing. The other is to provide some income or revenues for the township for capital projects in the dollars that could be made from selling that and developing it, or however we want to go. So maybe, and we'll see what other members of council think, that could be the next one to move up, because it's been discussed. But,
well, and in fact, you have an open spot and perhaps even 3 open spots, given, but because it's budget guidance, from there you will actually go into your regular budget. So that might come off. And the service levels will be included in the budget. So you actually potentially have 3 kind of spaces.
Yeah.
Let's see how other people feel about items. Now, the ideal would be that, the request for decision would come back saying for any of these items, here's what's required. And so you're clear on the workload. Let's do maybe quick then, round table, just so we get everybody. David, what's your thinking around?
Eric had his hand
Eric,
on.
Eric, you go. Thanks, Eric.
If we're going to do roundtable, I can just wait. That's what it was.
No. Well, let's start with you. You had your hand up. So, Eric, you go.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're looking for some input on what items might want to move up. I mean, it's good to clarify how many slots there are because that would determine my interest level. So,
my sense, if we're hopefully for clarity, my sense is that you've actually got 3. If we're comfortable with. So, 1 to 3, Eric, you go.
Yeah, 1 to 3. Well, that's I think that's 20% to 60%. So that's right. maybe to tighten that range up a bit. I don't want to presuppose what's going to come out of this afternoon talking about the budget, and maybe that'll end up being a couple of different items. But it does seem to make sense to look at the Horn Pit item. I just wanted to, again, I'm going to start reiterating this. I want to look at make sure that one of the options with Horn Pit is actually not to sell it as well. There seems to be this assumption that we're going to sell it. I'd like to make sure that that's an equally weighted option. It seems to me too, a couple of these others are pretty minor. Maybe they could be moved up and completed before the end of the council term versus some of the others which are heavier. So maybe that would be an appropriate input. Something like, Township Road Network. Well, that's going to go on for another 20 years probably. Well, I don't know. Maybe that people can focus on. It's just a suggestion. Focus on items that actually can be completed within the remainder of this council term. Thanks.
Yeah. Do you have any in mind, Eric?
Public art seems to be something that we can probably wrap up here. I know staff are working on a bit of that anyway.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what public art reserve. I think that was referring to the policy process. Some of this, art amenity installation seems to be very similar to that, the way it's been working out. Yeah. So, some of these others can, I think, maybe be put on that list and completed here, even potentially by the end of the year. Thanks.
Okay. Good one. Thanks, Eric. And David.
Okay, thank you. Moving 3 up, one thing that kind of didn't bug me. Councillor Woodward's last meeting had commented about Horn Pit housing, and he said an interesting thing to me that resonated with me. Maybe we could wait a little longer and maybe get a lot more for it. And I guess you could use that theory with everything. What if we coulda, woulda, shoulda, or whatever. Okay, but so I think we need to put Horn Pit up, and we need to put up number 2, in my opinion, is equity and inclusion framework. That's a research direction. The reason I say that one, that may not seem really a meat and potato thing, but that is going to get us in trouble if we don't. Oh shit. I'm sorry. Are we back? Okay. Equity inclusion framework. If we don't move that up, that's going to be a problem, because that when you say it like equity and inclusion framework, that seems fluffy. But when you dig down into that, council needs to know if we have a policy, it doesn't even have to go to the council. It's that's the policy, and of course, council can, they can change that if they want. Sorry, and the third one, I have a persistent phone call. TOL property strategies, and I know that's paused, but we do know that's what we have in our hand. It's in our wallets. It's in our wallet. Where we go with that strategy, buying and selling, and it was mentioned earlier. Maybe a committee or a panel to have for land buying and selling. But when it comes to land buying and selling, you've got to have some real people that are honed in, focused, and that are good at it.
So David, at this point, we don't want to solve it. I just want to figure out, what
Okay.
are the
What,
candidates
1, 2, or
to move
3
up.
is
I
Horn
got it.
Pit, equity
Equity
inclusion, and TOL property strategy.
Good.
Put those up.
Great, thanks.
Sorry for
Margaret?
going on.
Yeah, no worries. Because today's wasn't intended we would start unpacking these, right? It's just
Okay.
a quick refresh. And
Yeah.
okay, Margaret.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Horn Pit is definitely something that we need to flesh out, and the equity inclusion framework, that discussion. So I'd like to see that one on there. As for the others, I mean, I guess there's sort of, to me, the art amenity installation and the public art reserve, I guess those are kind of tied together. So maybe those would be good to sort of just get those done. And yeah, so those would be my 3.
Great, thanks. And Bob?
Yeah, so I'm just watching you move stuff around. So you're saying, are we happy with 1, 2, 3 at the moment? And now that you've moved Horn Pit up, I'm happier. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
would you move any?
But I heard somebody say to sell or not to sell. But I mean, it says options, right? So
Yeah.
no decision has been made on that yet.
That's right. That's
But
right.
we need to move. Well, we are moving along, and if I remember correctly, there used to be a date beside it, wasn't there? So maybe staff could, when it gets like you say, we're not unpacking it right now, but it would be helpful if we're going to put it in a priority list. Can we, or maybe staff or someone could remind us where these are in the queue currently? Because if we're moving the list around and we're taking something from number 10 and putting it to number 1, maybe that's going to throw staff for a loop. But
Right.
let's find that out.
Yeah, thanks. Well, let's ask that question. Any insights there, Mark?
The equity inclusion framework was actually something put forth by Councillor Whitmarsh originally, and it was really left as a bit of a framework, I think. Not much has occurred on it since then because, as you pointed out, it was in the next category. So we would need both guidance, I think, from Council in terms of the definition, likely with Councillor Whitmarsh's input, and as well what direction.
Okay, sorry, I thought Bob was asking about Horn Pit. Where we're at.
Correct. Is that correct, Councillor Long?
Well, I'm sorry, I'm having a little hard time hearing. I was wondering where, right now we have these 4 on the top. I just want to make sure that staff are, we're consistent with staff in terms of their priority. Because there's no use us putting a list up there if staff doesn't have it on their list.
Yeah.
Sure they do, but I mean, there were dates up there before. But yeah, Gord, I think it's the dates that are missing. Now you're putting in September, December, so that would be helpful for me.
Yeah, and so we come back. So no dates at this point. The equity inclusion framework was, if you recall, really requires a CPC discussion. So staff are clear what you're looking for, so they can go on to do the research.
Well, I don't know, Gord, if that's where we were. I thought that we'd already, and you took the word research out. Weren't we going to research what other communities are doing and bring that back to council? I thought that was underway.
Okay.
Maybe other councils can remember. I can't.
Well, good point. So research so that we could have an informed discussion. I think you're right. Absolutely. And I think if I've got it, that there was some work being done on the Horn Pit options. Raman?
Gordon, I can jump in while Raman gets on cue. The referral was back from to staff to engage in some public consultation as to the form and options, I guess I put it more broadly. The challenge with that was we are in a situation where the neighborhood plans are not yet complete for the area. They're due to come back in the fall. And I think the thought process was, well, we really shouldn't be discussing any options before we have the neighborhood plan work underway. So it was left at that they could happen concurrently. We should be having those discussions once we have the plans in place. And that, of course, will depend upon what council does in terms of how they dispose of those plans.
Okay. So that would put it kind of late year or early 2022 if we keep it up here. So that was my recall, was we needed to get the ASPs done. Okay, so that was Bob. Steve?
Yeah, I think those items added up, coming up, Horn Pit, the equity inclusion, you're right, council has to discuss that. I think that the adding those things up are certainly worthy of discussion. So that's where I sit. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. And I just put budget in red, thinking that it's, if we're okay of what we do today is yet to come. And Kim?
I agree with moving Horn Pit up. It's become more of a public matter now, and there's interest in it. The equity and inclusion framework, I think it's going to be too complicated to get done quickly. And I don't agree with it being there because I don't agree with taking off the service levels and the budget guidance and because we haven't resolved that yet. I mean, we've gone through basically putting a list of things we'd like to add to the service level without having actually taken the step of looking at what's on the service level that needs to come off. So I'm not prepared to sign off on the importance of budget at this stage.
Okay.
And I do think that one of the other ones that I would put up there instead of 4 and 5 is the ALR removal land lifts. And it's not just the ALR land lifts, ALR removal land lifts, it's also commercial and industrial land lifts.
That's right.
Because that is a source of revenue for us going forward, and we need these new sources of revenue.
Great, thanks, Kim. Katrina?
Thank you. I just want to go back to number 2 on the now list. So it says COVID recovery, and then it's got a date of December attached there. I would prefer if this could possibly be moved up prior to our substantive budget discussions, because if I don't know what the impact is or have a generalized idea, I'm not necessarily certain that I'm comfortable in putting a budget forward without understanding what the implications might be. So if it's possible to change that date to have it more aligned with September or October rather than December.
Just a thought. It used to be that, would that be, if we kept budget guidance, because, it's a particular budget year, and we put COVID in with the budget, just moving it down there, would that work?
Yes. Yeah, I think that helps a lot. It's just that to me, it's like putting the cart before the horse. If you have that as an objective, but you're not meeting the timeline, then that's a problem. I guess my other comment is I agree actually with the Gloucester, and it is a source of revenue for us. And I know that staff are working on that, but the degree to which we could review that and potentially do the engagement and potential implementation, I think would be helpful, because we do have a lot of commercial and industrial development that could provide an alternate source of revenue that we don't currently have. So I would actually move that up on the list, just because it is revenue generating potentially.
Now, just for everybody, because it's always good to do that first round. I'll go to Jack next, and that first round. And if we're listening, perhaps what I'm hearing maybe is that given other items, perhaps Horn Pit, if it's not coming until December, perhaps something else can move up, and it could just kind of hover there for the next, almost 6 months. Jack?
Yeah, you could be right on the Horn Pit. It is to look at options, but I do think the equity inclusion framework is important in this day and age, and just to make sure that we do have a good solid policy. So I'd like to see that one up there. And the art amenity public art reserve, that can be combined into one. I think we could, perhaps deal with that as a one item. But yeah, that's my thoughts. Thanks.
Yeah, great.
And Eric has his hand up too.
Eric?
I wanted to also suggest, I don't really want to see number 3 there. You sort of move that up. I'm going to concur with one of my colleagues here that I think that's premature. I think that that's currently on the list of items to be discussed at CPC. And council hasn't determined that that's going to move forward in any substantial way. And I thought we were waiting for that conversation to occur. So to me, moving it up presupposes that it's happening. So then maybe we can just take it off the CPC list then if that's what's going to happen. I also don't want to spend hours of my time discussing things at CPC that have then just reversed at the council table. And I don't want that to happen with this as well. So I kind of object to it being moved up and taking the spot of something like Councillor Arneson mentioned, commercial rezonings, community benefits, or TL property strategy. Those are things we've been talking about for multiple years. And of course, the inclusion framework came out of a controversial vote, and it was didn't come out of a policy discussion. It came out of a knee-jerk policy reaction. So I would prefer we focus on other long-term items instead rather than that one. Thank you.
Right. So and again, we're not deciding today. It just gives us a sense of direction that we've got. The ASC direction, the district, sorry, seems pretty clear. The Horn Pit question, because nothing's actually going to happen with it right now until December, might provide some kind of slot. We have the art and public amenity policy that we think, okay, it's pretty specific, get it done. I'm also hearing that budget guidance, I put it in red because, hey, it's not done until it's done. And we've put in, there's all kinds of issues around debt management, service targets, COVID. And we've got the Gloucester that might have some potential for revenue. And that would leave the equity inclusion framework just simply requires some council discussion at some point. Township road network, we agree, is probably longer term. And the property strategy is again probably closely related to our budget discussion. So again, this is really feedback or direction back to staff, and staff would come back with these comments, what this all means for workload, and refresh the chart. So Mark, does that give you for now enough guidance on the priorities?
I think that helps. Thanks, Gord. Yep.
Right?
Bob has his hand up.
Yeah, there's a problem here. Okay, so talking about knee-jerk, the Gloucester estates, popped out of nowhere as well because we don't apply CACs to commercial and industrial, so that popped out of nowhere. But I think you better remove the word Gloucester because let's not pick on these poor people that were following some direction given by council many years ago. So I guess it's the whole concept of commercial and industrial CACs that is actually already on the staff program. In fact, they're coming back momentarily with a report about that. So first of all, I think we got to remove that word Gloucester. And, just to balance Woodward's comments there, we have these discussions at CAC to provide more information to make better decision handling. So there's no point in saying a knee-jerk or this and that, the other thing, because that CAC session that we had over Gloucester came out exactly the same way. We had a rezoning in front of us and it popped into a CAC. But anyway, CACs are what they are. But Gloucester is a one-off project. The issue of industrial and commercial CACs, I believe maybe staff could comment, is already underway through a couple of motions and also was already on the staff's work program regardless of what council decided. Perhaps I can get that clarified.
Okay. So regardless of where it came from, so we don't go down that rabbit hole, is the whole idea of commercial amenity. And staff, any comment on the CAC, and is that closely related to this Gloucester item?
Thanks, Gord. Raman could perhaps provide an update on the report. The report originally, I think, was for industrial and commercial CACs, and the ALR did come with its application. They don't happen frequently, but they probably could be wrapped up into the same category. Raman?
That is correct. As previously reported to council, staff is currently based on previous direction of council, anticipating being able to have the consultant make the issues in the form of a presentation to council in one of the upcoming meetings in July for council consideration, specifically dealing with community plan amendments, regardless of the type of use, as long as an application triggers a community plan amendment, what should be looked at. And in addition to that, matters that are brought forward in terms of land use changes that are not residential. So any non-residential development application, what are the potential recommendations for council to consider in terms of contributions beyond the typical requirements?
Thanks, Raymond. So I put,
so can we take Gloucester out of there, or do you need that in there still? Because this is more of a general thing, and the ALR removal is a small part of it. But as Mr. Safis just said, it's really in regards to OCP amendments and commercial industrial developments, I think is what I heard.
Yeah. I'm not an expert on it, so I'll wait for somebody else to see if that's. So right now we've got hopefully something that covers that topic, a report coming in July. I've changed the budget to a framework because that's the product. And if Sandra's there or Mark, you start your budget in September, October?
Thanks, Gord. Actually, you're correct in terms of the nuts and bolts, but right now I think that's where the importance of the afternoon comes in, is to get some sort of direction to the process. So technically we're starting this afternoon.
Yeah, but the framework could come back in July, August?
Well, probably September is more realistic because we've got 2 meetings in July, and August is a vacant month, so I'll leave September.
Okay, no worries. Okay, so trying to get zero in on those dates. So the guidance is today, but it's the framework that we can all touch and go back to. That's the product for September. This is important, because it sets us up. And at this point, probably premature. We need staff to think about that timeline for the art policy. And we've got a horn pit coming December. So tentatively, we've got 5 items with equity inclusion framework requiring some discussion at CAC, which would likely require some kind of research of what's going on. We've got the total property strategy kind of hovering, and the township road network. Now remember, that was just traffic flow hotspots. It wasn't the big enchilada. So I'm just going to check if I'm going to suggest we break for lunch.
Come back. Two more hands up, Gord, if you want.
Okay.
If you want to just go through them quickly, they can just.
Yeah, you bet. Let's do that. I'm going to wrap this up, and then that will give us 3 hours, or give or take, for budget from around 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock. And hands, Jack?
Margaret, and then Eric.
Yeah, no question. So I noticed the equity inclusion framework is now in the next, when it was at number 3. So how did it get moved down? And it's not a big deal. I'm just wondering, because it just seemed like it was after one councillor's made a comment, and now it ended up back in the purple. So
yeah. Well, if we think it's just it's the research, easy to move up. So then the question is the horn, does that, if Hornbit's not till December and staff are comfortable bringing equity inclusion framework research back, I mean, we could just do a swap with those two. Eric?
Yeah, thanks. I had a couple comments. There was actually 2 councillors that objected to being in the top 5. The other thought, though, is I wanted to be clarified about number 5, just to be helpful, that we're not discussing CACs, but that we keep hearing that from certain sectors. We're actually discussing community benefits of an undetermined nature. So it's not a CAC. CACs are specific to residential development. So we keep, again, just to reiterate, I think need to be important that we're also not necessarily referring to land lists. So if I could suggest a community benefit from perhaps a unique commercial development or something like that. Commercial industrial, maybe Mark can assist, but we spent a fair bit of time discussing with management how to terminology this correctly. And we need to be careful to avoid CAC and the suggestion that it's a community benefit is what we're looking at, not a CAC. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. I'll put that in here and then somebody can wordsmith this. So just make sure I get there. Okay. Good.
Okay, I think, yeah, just going back to that equity inclusion framework, for me, the genesis of that was what Metro Vancouver is doing, the work that they're doing on it. I don't see it as it came from some motion, knee-jerk motion. It came from, this is what's happening across Canada. And I don't mind if it's on the next, but I think it needs to be, you know, and it's glad we're going to be discussing it, but it's something we can't lose sight of. I think it's something that's important that we ensure that we are, that our municipality has some solid framework around equity and inclusion, because it's a really big hot topic in Canada. And that's what I look at. It really came to me as the work that Metro Vancouver is doing and no other municipalities. So that's where I see it. Steve is next, I think.
Steve, and just on this, so we're focused on this, the topic is if council would like to have an equity inclusion discussion before December, this is easy. We just switch Horn Pit, it's hovering, and we move it to next because it's not coming till December. And so Steve?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we can hear you. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I have a technical. When I have my headphones on, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't.
Okay, so
and
the focus is Horn Pit, housing, and equity inclusion.
Horn Pit's still important to discuss it and keep it front and center. Inclusion, I would ask a quick question to staff. Are we not doing some of that already? Just the genesis of how it's evolving, not necessarily with Metro Vancouver, the province and the federal government as well. Are we not already doing something like that, if I may, through a chair?
I think you're referencing the framework and the research. We're in the very early stages, I put it that way. If we're doing anything, it'd be coming under a social planner. Raman, where is that on the horizon? I'm not sure it's had too much attention yet because it was the next item. Can you comment?
Sorry, are we talking about the Horn Pits report?
No, the inclusion framework.
Equity inclusion.
Staff is not currently acting on that yet.
Okay, well, I hear. Here's what I mean. As a former teacher and former member of a union, probably the union has their rationale working with their members on developing those type of relationships. I'm sure when somebody comes to the front counter here, we must have a way of dealing with folks that different genders, different cultural, indigenous people, and we must have something in place. Maybe not to the highest level, but we must have something in place.
Well, let's say we do, but that's not what this is. This is an equity.
We're having a fun here, unpacking all this stuff. But I was testing you. It's a test on you. You used to be a teacher. I'm testing you.
Yeah, no problem.
You've unpacked. Anyway, I know we've got a session from 1 till 4 or something. So, but anyway, I just wanted to put those things out there.
Okay.
Thank you. That's good.
So my comment to try and get us there would be if we want to have that discussion in August, September, October, November, our task is actually quite simple. Just give it a date, say November, say October, and then the Horn Pit is still front and center, but it's not coming till December. This council will not be doing anything with it for 6 months, right?
Well, just to provide a bit of clarification, it's not that it's not coming until December. It will come to council no later than December.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Okay. So I'm going to suggest we leave it at 6 right now so people can eat and we can get on to budget discussion.
Hey, Gord, I just want to add one more thing. I'm not going to make a speech, but the reason that I objected to it wasn't because I object to a framework.
No.
Is that every other item on that list has a council motion attached to it. the number 6 has been referred to CPC to discuss with whether we're going to do it or not. And I think putting it on that list is basically an abuse of that process. It's short-circuiting that process. We're deciding to do it by putting it on that list, whereas, again, I'll repeat it, everything else on that list has a council motion.
Yeah, my understanding was that in order to have a good CPC discussion and get council direction, staff would have to do a little bit of research to enable that good discussion. So that was my recall, which would actually, from a practical point of view, would actually still make it a next item. So we're working with the logistics. So the research was simply to be able to have a CPC discussion and then clarity around direction, if that helps.
Which is interesting because we actually have council policies that say that if you're going to spend so many hours of staff time on an item, you have to have a council motion to do that. So again, I just find this all just a tad unusual given the process that some of us have to go through to get items on the agenda.
Fair enough. Okay. So I'm going to just kind of, for now, just going to go like that and go and do something like that so that we can kind of sort that out. And golly gee, maybe there's 6 items. So let me highlight that so we can come back. And so let's break for lunch. We'll come back. We'll have hopefully a quick thinking about that. But then we're going to go through the budget guidance, which has a lot of specific items. So we want to make sure that we have time for that. Let's do a time check. It looks like 12:45, so it sounds like 1:15. Everybody good for 1:15? Okay, 1:15.
Sounds great.
1:15.
Yep.
Okay, see you then. Thank you.
Oh, is the meeting over there, Gord? Where am I?
Yeah, Steve, the meeting is over.
Hey, we're late, 2 minutes. Gord, you're muted.
Okay, just because you snuck your lunch in while you were supposed to be meeting.
Oh, I have no problem. I can listen to you guys and eat all day long.
Well, I actually had to make my lunch. I didn't get it delivered like you. I had to cut up some carrots.
You're the cook, Bob.
Yeah, and carrots will make me smarter.
Okay, well, speaking of being smarter, let's go to budget guidance, and we can always circle back to the chart if we want. But just to frame what we're doing is we're not making decisions, number one. Number two, we're providing guidance to staff in the preparation of the budget. So we're not deciding. If you choose to decide, you can do that with notices of motion after we're done. But at this point, it's a discussion, and everybody gets to play. We have had a discussion previously. So my proposal is that based on our discussion today, that we would provide a framework, a document, a product that would provide something we can all go back to. You could even adopt that by resolution if you want. I'll get that to you in the next 5-6 days. So that's where we're kind of heading. In our previous discussion, we did talk about several different elements. One was, the timeline, the model, information, services, which we've already done. We're just going to take you through everything. We talked about guidance, and this is where a lot of the items that are in Kim's note would be covered. And then we would decide on next steps. So let's go at the beginning. I've put some yellow, just highlighted based on conversations with staff, some of the areas that perhaps require more discussion, than others. So let's start with the timeline. Pretty straightforward, pretty logical. We talked about earlier capital approval for favorable tenders. So staff believe that that's very possible and that we could do some partial approvals by January, which would get you ahead of the pack on tendering. An interim budget by year end. So the schedule would include by December, there would be an interim budget, at least so that not everything kind of gets stalled until perhaps April or May. Earlier council input. Well, guess what? We're doing that today. So guidance and priorities, which was why the priorities were discussion was important, as well as the service areas of interest. We'd have earlier projections. It can be a challenge, but remember they're estimates, they're projections around surplus, DCCs, the growth ratio, which again is one of the items on the list. And again, the intent would be in December. There was also some discussion around public awareness or engagement, and I'll end there. Does council have any thoughts on that? What they would like to see? So just on the pragmatic start and finish, so I can segment the discussion. Any comments, observations on schedule and completion? And Jack, I'll look to your collective. Kim.
Yes. So I just want to make it clear. One of the notices of motion that I had was that the Township Council set by resolution the acceptable property tax increase for the next year prior to commencement of the budget process for that year. So earlier council input that's on this screen in front of us, does that mean that council in July will be saying to staff, this is the property tax increase we want you to target on? And would that also include being able to say no more than current cost of living plus 1%, unless there's exceptional circumstances?
It would if the next discussion assumptions would be the parameters. So that could very well be in, well, whether it's July or August. So the short answer is it's possible if they chose to do that, yes.
Okay, well, this is the key phrase. Who chooses to do that?
Council.
Council.
Yeah.
Okay. So that means that if we're not going to have a policy on this, that every year we're going to have a motion in July saying the tax increase for the next year will be no more than 3% or 2% or whatever.
If that was the guidance may not include that parameter. So the guidance that's provided will be the guidance decided by council, right? So
Okay. Well,
yeah.
the issue that my notices of motion were responding to, or part of the issue, is that this has been very much staff driven, this whole process. It has been for as long as I've been on council. That staff come to us, they ask for, as they did this year, 9-point-something% increase. We all gasp. And then it gets whittled down to whatever is acceptable to both sides. But I don't think the acceptable to both sides is what it's all about. It should be council showing direction on this and saying, no, we feel that the taxpayers can only afford this much this year.
Yeah. And so if you chose to do that, when we get to that discussion, that would be provided. So the short answer is yes, if that's the will of council when we get to that item.
Okay.
So right now, we're just on the timeline. If the guidance was, last time we did this was over a year ago, it was actually to come back with 3 scenarios, right? Not just one. So that could be guidance as well. So I understand what you're saying. I just don't know what that guidance will be, but that guidance would be provided this year in July. For 2023, it might be August, September. But for this year, which is 2022, the expectation is in July, today, we will set that, begin to set that course, even though there will be not necessarily any motions today, right? So I'm trying to answer your question. The answer is yes.
Thank you.
I just don't know if it'll be the scenario you're suggesting.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So Gordon, I think we just open up, discussion, get input from council.
Yeah.
So
we will get
Bob
there.
And Katrina.
Yeah, so we will, just so we're clear though, because I was trying to segment the easy parts of the discussion. This is just about schedule, right? Later you can decide, are you providing a window or parameters? And so we'll get there. I just want to commit to everybody, we'll get there. So on the schedule, Katrina.
Yeah, thank you. I do appreciate the fact that it's now delineated with a general timeline. I do agree that we should have the earliest possible council input. I just want to clarify, and potentially through you, Gord, and maybe Mr. Backen, about the idea about setting something that's very prescriptive in terms of a yearly going forward. So I guess my concern is that each council of the day will have its unfettered discretion to decide in each budget year. And the degree, I hope I'm not going too far afield with this, but it occurs to me that if we're discussing this, that there has to be very specific language around the fact that potentially council wants to have a lot more input and review and suggestions or recommendations, but that if it's so prescriptive that it says it can't be this amount, it can't be more than that amount, or it has to be this amount or less, that could get us into trouble, is my question.
Thanks, Katrina. So at this stage, exactly where we are right now, I've highlighted the term. It's the timeline that we're talking about, not the so that's all it is for 2022.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah, how prescriptive it will be, and that would be a timeline approved by this council for this budget, and could change, right?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
And then what the parameters are, we'll get to.
Okay. Thank you.
And you'll see it's actually in the next the next one. Who else have we got? We got Bob and then Steve.
Yeah, so we can't see the timeline, Gordon. You've taken it down. So,
oh, sorry. Did I take it down?
You know, I know you were trying to answer the no right answer question that came up earlier, but it's impossible for any organization to set a predisposed budget increase when they don't even know what the needs and requirements are of the organization. I know that's something that I guess each one of us have to grapple with in different ways. It's certainly a very basic business concept, anyone that knows anything about business, because how do you possibly set a budget when you don't know what the needs and requirements are? And I have to take exception. I would have said point of order, because when I say point of order, it means I've heard an untruth. And staff didn't come to us and ask us for a 9 point whatever percent. It simply gave us the state of the nation. Under the current conditions, with this kind of income and these kinds of needs, this is kind of where we're at. So certainly council has input anywhere along the stage, but I think we gotta nail this one. This constant mention of notices of motion, which was disposed of at the last meeting. We cannot possibly enter, at least I cannot be part of a council that's gonna enter into this whole discussion by saying, this is what the increase is gonna be, regardless of what the needs, concerns, and requirements are for our community, we're gonna fix it here. If that's the concept we're going down, and you said, sure, that's an option that could be considered, I think that maybe we should have a slight discussion about that. I don't want to create a rabbit hole for you, but really, if that's the concept that we're embarking on, and that's what we're trying to establish here, I think we're setting ourselves up for failure, because our job is to look at the needs of the community, and whatever the needs are, we need to provide those needs. And whether that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I don't know what the number is, because we haven't seen the budget yet. But Lord, can you help us there? And can you tell us if other communities follow this kind of no right answer question? We're going to say, okay, you're going to get a 1% increase this year. That's it.
You know what? I'm happy to do that when we get to that discussion. Right now, I'm only on the timeline, and I'm sorry to be so crass about it, but when we get to the model, it will be scenarios. So right now, I'm on the start and completion of the budget, only the timeline. And the only area that we felt the gap was, do you have any suggestions around public input? If everybody wants to move beyond the timeline and just say it's okay, I will move to the model.
Okay, no, because I'm confused about the timeline. Let's talk about that, and thanks for straightening this out here. I had my say, but are we talking 2021 or 22 when we say January up there? Because this looks to me like I got to be clear. It says a 22 budget, but these dates on the right, these months that are listed, I imagine that's January 2021.
No, we're past that. It's January 2022. It's December of 2021.
Right. Okay. So that's the difference.
2021.
Right.
Here's 2022. Does that help?
It really does. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, no worries. Okay.
That really does help.
Right.
So public engagement would have to happen, I guess, if we're going to see, I don't know, doesn't that not have to happen perhaps in October, November?
Well, it depends whether you want to. Sometimes what people will do, they'll do the interim budget, which is simply to make sure nothing grinds to a halt, and they'll do it in kind of January, February. You know, that's a frequent
of 2022.
Yeah, 2022. Others will say, you know what, we actually approve a budget, period, in December of 2022, and they would do their discussions in October, November. Now, others, again, will say there's three different stages, if you will, of public. One is we want their input. Well, we might do that in October, November before we do the interim. We might want feedback, in which case we've got to give them something. So that would be the scenarios, the interim budget and scenarios, and we want their feedback. And the other is, you know what, we simply want the public to be aware, in which case we just make sure we keep them abreast of what's going on. So those are kind of the...
All right, that helps immensely too. So where are we at with this electronic tool that we had a few years ago? Is that that would obviously play into the timeline here, where we put out somewhat of a base and allow people to fiddly foo with it and punch in their numbers.
Okay, let's
maybe staff can comment. Do we still have that tool? Did we buy it? Is it still out there? Has it become useful in other communities? Gordon, maybe you can tell us that. Is it helpful?
Mark, is that Sandra or you, Mark?
No, I can jump in a little bit. Again, I know we're on the timeline, so I'll be very quick.
Yeah.
The tool still exists and can be utilized. It usually comes in as part of the public awareness and engagement phase. And it really just lets people be aware in terms of the impact of any increases, how that will affect them by putting in their data.
And and when would that occur? It would occur after council has seen something, and your anticipation would be what, 2021 or 2022?
Well, they'll be part of the public awareness process, so it depends how we design it, but ordinarily it's been in 2022. But I was going to comment, Gordon, you're quite right in terms of these processes. Over the years, we've tried to streamline the process and try to move away from interim budgets just because of the workload and flow that we have. So we've gone to, if you will, a single budget process past January, February. You make some good comments. My only comment is that to do so requires additional resources to actually make it work, and we're kind of lacking on the resources. So as long as that's understood, we can certainly do it and move forward, but it does mean that age-old question of then where do we get the resources to do it?
So would your anticipation be that we would want actually a budget approval by December?
That would be the optimal in terms of trying to be ready for the next year. The council, though, would have to be comfortable with the process and the feedback then occurring much earlier, again, with estimated numbers. One of the things we have with our current system is we usually have some firmer numbers because it's rolling into January, February timeframe.
So in your ideal world, rather than a two-step, you would like to see the budget approved by January, February, March?
January would be wonderful. January 30th would be really good.
Okay. So I'm just going to put January 30th. And if that was the case, then the fallback would be an interim budget, if that makes sense to everybody. Right? So if we fail, that would be interim. Okay. And that would mean, back to Bob's question, that the awareness or input, electronic or live, would actually occur when? November, December, January?
Usually it's after the council has seen the budget and is between, shall we say, the readings and final adoption. Provide some time in there.
Sounds like January. Does it sound like January?
No, that sounds correct, because in that model, we're trying to accelerate things, so it's happening just after Christmas.
Okay, so let's change, so we're very clear, this is guidance. It's really the draft budget that by year end, it's a draft budget for that council then wants to send out to the public in January for its approval in late January or early February. How's that sound to everybody? Does that sound okay?
Yes.
Okay. And failing that, it would be an interim budget. Now, is council okay with the public engagement techniques that have been used? Is there any changes that we want? Or
There are some speakers, perhaps.
okay, thanks, Jack.
Yeah, we've got Steve, and then Kim, and then David.
Yeah.
Okay, back to me. Okay, I think basically as far as the schedules, as long as we can make them work under our council agenda, or even if we have to have special meetings or planning sessions, that's all fine with me. Sometimes there's information and reports we need back, the finance needs back from different departments to get them to go. So there's a number of other things they have to stick handle through to make that work. But as long as staff can do it without, falling behind as far as certain departmental. Okay. Also the thing about public engagement, yes, anything and all things, being creative. It's always a challenge getting the public involved. Around tax time, we hear an awful lot from the public, which is understandable, but during budget time, it's not necessarily the case. So anything and anything creative or otherwise, social media, otherwise, meeting in shopping centers, just chart anything to get them more involved. And as far as we actually have a pretty frugal way of doing things at Township of Langley, and I think that we are as good or better than our surrounding communities, other than the communities that have the casinos. But anyway, those are my points. Thank you.
Thank you. Jack, back to you.
Kim's next.
Yeah, just to start with, I don't believe that it's fair to use point of order to call another councillor member a liar. And I don't think that that should be allowed. And I really object to being described as a liar by Mr. Long.
What are we talking about here? Jack, please step in. Nobody said anybody was a liar.
Okay.
You said I was telling untruths about 9%.
I didn't say it was you.
Not telling untruths. It was 9% or more.
Okay, let's move on.
Came to council.
Let's move on.
Okay. Second of all, with regards to the public awareness, the issue from my perspective is the electronic tool that's been used in the past was too restrictive. And it was focused in on making one or two changes, such as having a new fire hall and the cost of that fire hall and what it would do for the rest of the budget. And if you didn't have the new fire hall, what would it do? So it seems to me that the electronic tool, it does not give a complete picture and therefore is limiting in the validity of the results that are obtained through it.
Okay.
What I would like to see, and this was number 15 on my notices of motion, is that we have at least a representative proportion of the taxpayers be surveyed using a statistically significant survey tool.
Right, good to get. Okay, so we've got be creative, a potential survey of some sort. Great. And and I know we have other things going on, but if we can just keep focused on our role here today is to help provide guidance to staff to prepare a budget. So quite frankly, it doesn't look like or feel like the tail is wagging the dog, right? That's kind of the basis. So it's our focus is us providing good direction today. And so I just want to remind everybody.
So on the survey, it needs to be taxpayer survey statistically significant.
Yeah, I'll put survey in here, and then I've just made some limited space, but validity and taxpayer. Okay. And other suggestions around public awareness, because I think we've nailed our schedule. Before I move to model, back to Jack.
David's next. David.
Thank you very much. Okay, as a budget guidance, I know I don't want to get personal, but our farm, every time we sit down to do a budget, there's only 7 in our family, or 7. There's the boss, who's me, and then there's 6 other people, and it changes. You can't sit down. Like every 4 years, we're going to have an election, and that can bugger things up. And I think we went through that 3 years ago, or whatever it was, the last election, said this would help out in our election. We can put lots of things in there that can help out, but they can't make it so that Mr. Backham and I forget her name, Mrs. Sandra, start pulling her hair out because we're thinking, well, geez, we got this, that. Because when you start, you should know the figures, and they line up and they add up. But to put it too specific and to tie them up can be dangerous. So things change, times changes, every year changes. And like I say, in our example, it's pretty simple. You put the feed in the cow milks, how much, everything changes. So somewhere along the line, we've got to get rid of this feeling that the dog is wagging the tail's wagging the dog. And I understand, I know exactly, I understand where that's coming from. But I can't sit here in good faith say, well, you know what, I'm going to lead this. Or I'm going to say, well, I've got all these things, and this is what we need to do. Because I've got to convince Bob, Eric, Blair, Margaret, and Steve, everybody, and Patrina, and Kim. So when you get to the end of it, you throw everything up in the wind and see how it lands. So, but if we're going to throw everything up in the wind, and if it comes down, it's got to be on a checkerboard. It ain't going to work very well. I think good direction is like, it's got to stay like that. It can't be, well, every year in the next 5 years, we're going to come in at this. It can be in the next 5 years, we're going to try to keep it under this. And I know that's there's no teeth in it, so it won't work. But so I'm confusing the matter here. I'm not giving any direction, but what I am saying is that this budget is so important. It's more important than a lot of the things that we deal with, because it's taxpayers' money. Taxpayers come out to vote, and then they go away to the next election, generally. Some of them, not all of them. And taxpayers come out to pay their taxes. So it's like every year. So I have no issues with talking about it, trying to make it better. But I tell you, I don't have any good ideas coming from me. I know the meeting's public and nobody's going to vote for me now, but I can't necessarily say that we need to put this down on a paperboard, and when everything falls in line, they won't just fall down on a checkerboard. Anyhow, I haven't said anything, but that's my feelings. Thanks.
Right. So just going to try and wrap up on the schedule so we can move to the model. Let me review, because we're only on the schedule. We're going to have earlier council input, which is today. Bring it back and you can adopt it as a framework. It's a framework for the 2022 budget. We're looking for earlier capital approval. We're looking for earlier projections, which Sandra indicated she'll do her darndest. We'll have a draft budget by December. There'll be discussions before then, of course. Following that, you'll go to public engagement and awareness to use multiple techniques and looking for a budget approval by January. And Jack, we don't see any hands. I'm going to move.
Yeah, I've got one. Kim's. Kim has a
Kim?
Yeah, I'm just curious, why does it say at the very top, timeline approval by council -October?
Well, originally, I think that would be an error now. I think originally it was, my error.
So it should be what, September, July?
Yeah, you know, when August, September, like August.
But we don't have meetings in August. Staff go on holidays.
September.
Yeah.
Okay, September. But
Wait, aren't we coming up with it now in July?
well, we are, but we're not doing motions today, right? So this will come back, and then you would adopt it.
And that was my other question. So there's nothing preventing me from putting a motion forward at one of the July meetings to cap the 2022 budget at a certain level.
Yeah,
Once you've seen the budget, I guess.
Yeah, that's anybody's prerogative for sure. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
For sure. Because again, that's just the timeline, and we're doing a framework. So let me move to the model, because I think some of us are kind of there, so that's okay. So what did we say? We said we'd like to see an executive summary that allows us to be, I don't know, at a 10,000, 1,000 foot level, you know, to get that general context. And Sandra's going to work on a pilot template. And you'd want to see that template sooner than the budget, right? So the intent is let's fire a template, see if this meets our need. There was a discussion around being department-based with areas of interest. Those are the things that we did this morning, right? So staff will come back with a department-based budget indicating